Chapter 3659. Boom! With a loud explosion, the coiling dragon spear and the golden armor heavenly general were split in half by the demonic saber. The saber mark continued to extend and fell towards the demon refining gourd. Wung wung. The demon refining gourd suddenly trembled and released thousands of clouds and lights. Boom boom. With two consecutive sounds, one hit the demonic saber and the other hit the demon god Xiao Hua. Ka ka. The lights blocked the demonic saber. However, where the demonic chi fell, the lights condensed like glass and shattered into pieces. The demon god Xiao Hua was not so lucky. The demonic chi around his body was destroyed and hundreds of demons were destroyed. A big hole was pierced through his body. Goo goo. Just as the demon refining gourd let out another rumbling sound, the demonic saber suddenly made a strange sound. Then, the entire demonic saber turned into a waterfall and rushed towards the huge and vast whirlpool above its head. Rumble. The entire space let out a loud rumbling sound. The demon refining gourd also moved. The light caught up with the demonic saber and landed on the whirlpool. Then, the mouth of the demon refining gourd strangely produced a huge shadow that covered the entire whirlpool. The light of the whirlpool was extremely beautiful, like a 9-colored snail. The huge light shell was pulled flat and was about to fall into the demon refining gourd. The demonic saber also accelerated and a lightless saber mark instantly landed on a corner of the whirlpool. There was no sound at all and the whirlpool was cut down by 30%. The demons on the demonic saber laughed maniacally and their demonic chi soared into the sky. Before the light of the demon refining gourd could reach it, it wrapped around dozens of Yuanying and pulled them into the demonic saber. Woo! The demon refining gourd let out an ear-piercing sound. The remaining whirlpool in the wind inconceivably fell into the fist-sized demon refining gourd. Then, the demon refining gourd soared into the sky and flew towards the starry sky. The demonic saber actually continued to fight and its demonic chi surged again, wanting to chase and kill. Boom! The demon refining gourd suddenly shot out a 5-colored light. The demonic saber was afraid of this light. Just as it was about to mobilize its demonic chi to surround and suppress it, the light hit Xiao Hua's middle dantian. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A bleak sound of falling flowers was born from the devil god Xiao Hua's body. Strands of noble chi moved upon hearing the wind. This time, it didn't bombard the demonic chi, but instead moisturize and quietly invade the devil god Xiao Hua's body. Swoosh swoosh. Like a trickle, in the sound of water, golden, scarlet, and navy, 3 kinds of brilliance uncontrollably emerged from Xiao Hua's body. The blood-like black flame and the ink-like demonic chi hastily withdrew into Xiao Hua's body. Even the distant demonic saber let out a mournful cry and hastily withdrew into Xiao Hua's left hand like a waterfall. In just the blink of an eye, Xiao Hua's demonic body degenerated and returned to a slender Taoist cultivator. His tightly closed eyes opened and 2 wisps of clear chi emerged from his eyes. Raising his head to look at the sky, a slightly proud voice sounded, "2 immortal friends, why aren't you hurrying back to your positions?" Namo Mithriya Buddha, this poor monk thanks immortal friend Confucian cultivator. Bodhi hastily withdrew the innate primordial water and landed on the top of Xiao Hua's head. As soon as he entered the Naiwan palace, he immediately hid inside the exquisite pagoda. Alright, I also have to thank immortal friend. The green-robed Xiao Hua shrugged and also landed on the top of Xiao Hua's head. With a somewhat unwilling expression, he said, "But I's home is now in a mess, how can I rest?" How could Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua not know what the green-robed Xiao Hua was thinking? He faintly replied, "Immortal friend Yuji is currently unconscious. You all are no match for the demonic saber. Our main bodies can only be temporarily controlled by this little one. However, immortal friend can rest assured, this little one will not make the main bodies do anything. As for immortal friend Yuji has already taken the heaven-mending pill and the medicinal power in his dantian has already taken effect. If immortal friend still wants to stay in the main body, you can go to his dantian and stimulate the medicinal power. This little one will still send down the 5 Qi righteous thunder to help immortal friend recover his nascent soul. Good. The green-robed Xiaohua stood up and bowed, then disappeared into Xiaohua's body. At this moment, a huge kacha sound came from above the heads of the primordial spirits. At the place where the devil refining gourd disappeared, layer after layer of cracks fell like thunder. The entire starry sky began to collapse, and a kind of heaven-destroying and earth-exterminating aura swept through the entire space. Not good, this great formation is about to be sealed. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua was shocked and anxiously said, "This little one will control the main body and rush out of the great formation. Good?" Several primordial spirits all agreed. King. The sound of a sword suddenly rang out. The vast qi within the great formation gathered into Xiaohua's body. Thousands of sword lights were born from the surface of Xiaohua's body. In a moment, Xiaohua had already turned into a huge sword and rushed into the chaotic starry sky great formation against the overwhelming desolate aura. Outside the great formation, as Xiaohua expected, the huge water-type heavenly general was already standing outside the cave with a huge sword in his hand. At this moment, he heard the rumbling sound coming from the cave and waves of destructive aura rushing out from the mountain peak. His expression changed greatly. What is going on? Kong Hongwu and that Taisher Zhanrun. What the hell are they doing? The heavenly general's face showed doubt and anger, even if there is a gap between the two. It's impossible for them to have the guts to ruin her senior's important matter. The situation could not get worse, only the worst. In less than half a cup of tea's time, a huge boom sound rang out. On the mountain peak, the entire mountain peak disappeared with a bang. A gorgeous brilliance soared into the sky. Even the heavenly general was unable to see what was inside the brilliance. That suffocating aura flashed and disappeared. How is this possible? This scorching sun great formation still hasn't ended. That thing, how could it leave by itself? Once that thing left, the scorching sun great formation would collapse by itself. The heavenly general turned pale with fright and muttered to himself, "Damn Kong Hongwu, he actually dared to ruin this daddy's work. If her senior blames this daddy will eat you alive." While speaking, the heavenly general did not dare to be negligent. With a clap of his hand, a four-colored brilliance rushed out from the water-form body and chased up into the sky. Boom! The huge body collapsed. Countless amounts of water fell onto the foot of the mountain and slowly flowed into the deep pool. At this moment, the huge rocks on the mountain peak rolled down the mountain slope. In the direction the heavenly general was looking at, within the star formation that was like a scorching sun, there were monstrous flames. Clusters of flames of various colors were like the grass on an ordinary mountain peak, swaying with the wind. Even the ground inside the star formation was covered with layers of fire carpets. From afar, within the undulating flames, there were actually endless mountain peaks. These mountain peaks were also formed by flames. Some of these mountain peaks were straight to the sky, while others were grotesquely shaped, and so on. If not for the heat of the flames distorting the air within the star formation, even if someone accidentally entered, they would never have thought that this was a world of fire. After all, between the mountain peaks, the faint streams of fire still flickered with a dark green brilliance. The gurgling sound of water was also incessant. Some people would believe it if they said it was a celestial scenery. However, at this moment, rumbling sounds were incessantly coming from one of the mountain peaks. It was very abrupt among the monotonous whistling sounds of the flames within the star formation. Bang! Immediately after, there was a loud sound. From a place on the mountain peak, a huge human-shaped fire shadow rushed into the air. A faint blue light followed closely behind and hit the human-shaped fire shadow. The fire shadow immediately solidified, and the red fire shadow turned black and red. Then, a fist of a few feet in size rushed out from the mountain peak and hit the black and red fire shadow. Shwa! The fire shadow suddenly turned into fist-sized fire crystals and fell from the air. As the fire crystals fell, two figures flew out from the mountain peak and stood majestically in the air. The one in front was Zhang Daoran and the one behind was Sun Kongshangren. Sun Kong Shangren smiled and said, Brother Daoran, your ice sealing technique has reached the point of perfection. It is very suitable for this formation. This bullshit fire giant is the bane of others, but in your hands, it is our lucky star. Hee hee. Zhang Daoran chuckled slightly, but there was some worry between his eyebrows. He turned his head and looked at where the two came from, but he didn't speak. Sun Kong Shangren waved his hand and said, Fellow cultivators, whose turn is it? Hurry up and collect the fire crystals. As Sun Kong Shangren's voice fell, a dozen gold core cultivators flew out from the mountain peak behind them. These gold core cultivators were flashing with a faint brilliance, trying their best to resist the flames of the star formation. They all flew to the place where the fire crystals fell and searched carefully. After a while, each of them took a few fire crystals and flew into the sky. They bowed and said, Thank you for your kindness. No need to be so polite. Sun Kong Shangren was very happy. He flicked his sleeves and said, Inform the fellow cultivators behind to be ready at any time. If there is anything good, wait for me to inform you. Yes, Junior understands. The dozen gold core cultivators flew back to the mountain peak. After a while, more than 200 cultivators flew out from behind the mountain peak. They were either gold core cultivators or nascent soul cultivators. They stood in the air in a very orderly manner, without a trace of disorder. Seeing Zhang Daoran's worry, Sun Kong Shangren also sighed deeply. He looked behind him and said in a low voice, Brother Daoran, you don't have to look anymore. It's been almost a year. Brother Xiao was fine, he would have caught up with us a long time ago. Alas. Zhang Daoran withdrew his gaze and also sighed deeply. He replied, How could I not know? But I always felt that a strange person like Brother Xiao would not easily fall on this Yao mountain. I always want to see a miracle. Miracle? That's a picture painted by the Confucian cultivators for us Taoist cultivators. Sun Kong Shangren was disdainful and complained, Actually, I don't want to criticize you, but you should have pulled Brother Xiao out of the stone formation at that time. How could I not want to? Zhang Daoran's face was filled with regret. But he was unwilling to come out and said that he wanted to save people inside. How could I delay him? I originally thought that if he didn't come out, I would go in to look for him again. Who knew that the entrance of the star formation could only be left but not entered? It would be even more difficult to find the entrance again. Chapter 3660. Brother Daoran. I was wrong, I shouldn't blame you. Seeing Zhang Daoran so regretful, Venerable Sun Kong hurriedly said with a smile, Everyone has their own luck, Brother Xiao is also his own choice, he can't blame anyone. You shouldn't blame yourself too much, otherwise it will affect your Dao heart. Moreover, although Brother Xiao can't be seen anymore, his heart, or his thoughts, didn't he leave behind? I didn't say it very well. In short, I feel like Brother Xiao is by my side. Venerable Sun Kong actually took the initiative to admit that he was wrong. How was this the Venerable Sun Kong he knew before entering Yaode Mountain? Zhang Daoran smiled and nodded, You are right. Thinking about the scheming between you and me, I really feel childish. Like a 3 or 4-year-old child. Really boring. Look at now, our words and actions do not go against our hearts. We have given our trust to each other. This feeling is really solid. In the words of the secular world, even sleeping can wake up naturally. Indeed. Venerable Sun Kong looked at the 200 cultivators behind him. Previously, I only felt that the group of cultivators trembling in fear in front of me was my prestige. But now, I feel that it is only their fear of me, it is not sincere admiration and worship. Now, although these cultivators had never sworn loyalty to his little brother, their gratitude was even more heartwarming than any oath. This was something that came from the bottom of their hearts. I also feel especially at ease. Brother Xiao, I am afraid he is not younger than us. If he did not have thousands of years of experience, how could he have so many gains? Compared to what he has seen and heard, I feel that my years have been wasted. Zhang Daoran sighed again. Brother Daoran, there is no need to be like this. Venerable Sun Kong smiled bitterly. We are just concentrating on cultivation, although we are old. Some views are not necessarily correct, and the amount of experience we have is also little. We can't just ruin ourselves like this, right? Sai, no matter what, if cultivation is not counted, I feel that there is a big gap between me and Brother Xiao. Zhang Daoren said as he looked back again. Venerable Sun Kong was quite distressed, and also glanced. This sweep didn't matter, but Sun Kong raised his brows and said urgently, "Not good, there are fire crows and flying dragons attacking." Brother Dao ran, "I'll leave the wyvern in front to you. Leave the rest to me and my fellow Taoists." Good. These fire crows and flying dragons aren't as strong as the flame giants. I can't deal with them alone. Zhang Daoren naturally understood. He nodded and agreed. His Taoist robe flapped, and his figure flew into the sky. He slapped his hand on his head again. A huge wind whistled. A huge blue hand that looked like it was made of crystal expanded to 100 feet in size and grabbed towards the distance. Exalted Master Sun Kong said loudly, "Fellow Taoists in the fourth group, set up the formation to lure the enemy. The second and first groups will surround and kill the enemy on the left. The fifth and sixth groups will seal off the right. Golden Core cultivators set up formations at low altitudes to kill the injured fire crows and fire dragons." "Yes, we will do as you say." The group of cultivators responded in unison. Looking at the fire crows and fire dragons that blotted out the sky, there was no panic on their faces. Each of them very skillfully arranged according to Sun Kong's prior arrangements, setting up the formation to prepare for battle. In a moment, the wind blew above the mountain and flames fluttered. Countless rumbling sounds rose and fell. After fighting for a full hour, the sounds finally stopped. Looking at the cultivators, although they were exhausted and had suffered many casualties, their eyes flashed with a strange light. It was as if they had long understood from this joint battle that if they didn't work as one and didn't share weal and woe, they wouldn't have been able to reach here. Even the Crimson Star Formation and Bright Moon Formation would have left their corpses behind. "Quick, look! A shooting star!" At this moment, a Golden Core cultivator with a weak cultivation suddenly shouted, pointing at the distant horizon. Everyone was delighted. After all, in the Crimson Star Formation and Bright Moon Formation, the appearance of a meteor was a sign of a rare treasure. In the first two formations, everyone was very lucky. They were the closest to the meteor and found the trace of the rare treasure early. Moreover, everyone worked together to resist the attacks of other cultivators before obtaining the rare treasure. This time, the meteor that appeared in the Scorching Sun Formation was far away, but it was obvious that it was the location of the last treasure, the pure Yang ancestor. If it was before, once they heard the warning of this Golden Core cultivator, all the cultivators would definitely rush out like a swarm of bees. Who would care about others? They wouldn't even forget to kill others on the way. After all, it was the pure Yang ancestor. Although they didn't know what it was also the last treasure of Star-Lord Palace. It was probably more precious than the green abyss dragon saliva and the cold ghost gall. "Let's go!" Seeing that the cultivators were waiting for his order, Exalted Master Sun Kong smiled slightly and said, "When we get this pure Yang ancestor, our trip will be complete." "Good." The cultivators all applauded and flew into the distance in an orderly formation. When all the cultivators flew away, they saw that behind the fiery clouds in the sky, there was a slight gap, and a beautiful face with a little worry and a hint of joy appeared. Wasn't it the guardian of the Scorching Sun Formation, Sun Chicken Ant Suchiron? Yes, the cultivators of Dao sect have learned how to unite. With this seed of mutual support, Dao sect will not be destroyed. Kong Hongwu's plan. I'm afraid it will fail this time. Gusu Chiron praised in a low voice. I just don't know. Who is this Xiao Hua? How could he have such a great influence on Zhang Daoran and Exalted Master Sun Kong? But after listening to Exalted Master Sun Kong, I'm afraid this person has already died in the star formation. Speaking of this, Gusu Chiron looked at the meteor in the distance again and shook her head slightly. Unfortunately, the Scorching Sun Formation is not something nascent soul cultivators can break through. If it was the star formation of Yaodai Mountain, I could still be merciful, but here, I am powerless. The Immortal Palace, what are they planning? Do they really want all these Dao sect cultivators to die here? Listen. While speaking, Gusu Chiron's eyes flashed with a sigh. She waved her hand and the clouds moved. A faint voice came from the depths of the clouds. I can only hope that you can hold on for a year. The meteor streaked across the sky. Finally, with a loud boom, a huge hole appeared in a huge mountain of flames. Then the meteor shattered. Layers of inscriptions rushed out like a swarm of bees. Waves of awe-inspiring energy rotated in the air. A jade box emitted multicolored rays of light and floated in the volcano. As soon as the jade box appeared, the inscriptions changed under the influence of the light. One by one, the inscriptions quickly decomposed and combined, turning into a wave of fire that rushed down from the volcano. A small part of the inscriptions rushed into the sky like a fountain, covering the space hundreds of feet above the volcano. Then, the entire volcano trembled violently, and all the inscriptions disappeared in the void. Aside from the flames of the volcano and the clouds above the volcano, there was nothing strange. In the time it took to finish a meal, dozens of rays of light crossed the sea of fire and flew closer. Two ferocious divine senses swept over at the same time. One of them landed on the jade box and immediately withdrew, while the other continued to explore the side of the volcano. Several lights landed in front of the volcano, and the first person to appear was a nascent soul cultivator wearing an emperor's robe. This cultivator looked to be in his 30s, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. He looked very mighty, especially the thick arrogance in his eyes, which made people want to retreat. Behind this emperor was the person who withdrew his divine sense. He was only a few feet tall and was the childlike Huodazhenren. Huodazhenren's eyes revealed a trace of greed, but when he glanced at the nascent soul cultivator in front of him, his face immediately changed to a humble expression. Huodazhenren was also a mighty late nascent soul cultivator, but in front of this nascent soul cultivator, his innate temperament was far inferior. Needless to say, even Huodazhenren himself felt ashamed of his own inferiority. Fellow Zhai Xing. Huodazhenren smiled apologetically. Inside this jade box, I'm afraid the last treasure of this jade pavilion gathering is the pure young ancestor. The previous two treasures appeared too coincidentally. They were actually close to Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong, so they took the lead. Now that luck has brought them to you, the last treasure will be yours. This nascent soul cultivator whose temperament was comparable to an emperor was naturally the Zhai Xingzi mentioned by Kong Hongwu. Zhai Xingzi's face showed a trace of a strategist's smile. He looked at the jade box in the distance and then looked at Huodazhenren, saying, Fellow Huoda is right. If we can get our hands on this jade box, it will be the end of the Yaotai gathering if nothing unexpected happens. Fellow Taoist, don't worry, I always do what I say. If I can't use this pure young ancestor, I will definitely give it to you. Just like how Sun Kong Shengren gave the cold ghost gallbladder to Zhang Daoran. Yes, thank you fellow Taoist. Huodazhenren's face showed a smile. He looked around and didn't see anything strange, but his heart was a little worried. His mission this time was naturally not the pure young ancestor, but to kill Xiaohua. Unfortunately, he had been searching for nearly a year, but there was no trace of Xiaohua. Even if he wanted to kill him, he couldn't. He couldn't explain it to Kong Hongwu of Star Lord Palace. Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong Shengren led nearly 200 cultivators, most of whom were Yuanying realm cultivators. Zhai Xingzi and Huodazhenren led dozens of cultivators, most of whom were Yuanying realm cultivators. The rest of the cultivators were led by 3 or 4 middle-stage Yuanying realm cultivators. However, most of them were Jindan realm cultivators, and their strength was much weaker. The rest of the cultivators who were not in these 10 groups were all Yuanying realm cultivators. They were proud and aloof. Even if they gained nothing, they did not want to join hands with others. Chapter 3661. Of the nearly 700 nascent soul cultivators, more than half of them had perished in the Yaotai meeting. It was far more than the previous Jade Pavilion gathering. As for the Jindan cultivators, they were even more miserable. Those below the middle stage of the Jindan stage were basically dead, and only 40% of the late stage of the Jindan stage were left. These Jindan cultivators didn't dare to break through the formation by themselves. They all followed the nascent soul cultivators and didn't dare to leave. Now, these Jindan cultivators only had one wish in their hearts, and that was to quickly end this damned Jade Pavilion gathering. As soon as the Dragon Gate opened, they would definitely be the first to rush out regardless of everything and never come to Jade Mountain again. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never come again. In fact, the Taoist cultivators were indeed tragic, but there was a big gap between this and what Kong Hongwu had imagined. The nascent souls of these nascent soul cultivators who had died were really not commensurate with the large investment of the Immortal Palace. Most of the credit should be given to Xiao Hua for the Dao cultivators to be able to survive. Not to mention that Xiao Hua restrained Star-Lord Palace, not to mention that Xiao Hua killed 3 Star-Lords, not to mention that Xiao Hua personally saved so many nascent soul and Jindan cultivators. Xiao Hua was able to use his Dao heart to move Sun Kong Shangren and Zhang Daoren, which was already the greatest thing. This kind of move was imperceptible, like the spring wind and rain, causing Sun Kong Shangren and Zhang Daoren to go from hostility and suspicion to mutual recognition and cooperation. Not only did the two of them not die, but they also protected dozens of nascent soul cultivators around them from dying. Influenced by them, the other nascent soul cultivators who were also suspicious began to follow suit. These nearly 10 groups of cultivators gradually formed and fought together in the bloody storm of the past year. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiao Hua killed Kong Hongwu. Kong Hongwu's plot to kill all the nascent soul cultivators in the Scorching Sun Formation couldn't be carried out. Otherwise, even if Zhai Xingzi and the others came here, they still wouldn't be able to survive. Fire de Jinren looked around and whispered, "Fellow Zhai Xingzi, let's hurry up and do it. This is the rhythm of the early bird getting the first bite." Alright. Zhai Xingzi readily accepted the suggestion and waved his hand. "Fellow Taoists, let's surround this volcano. First, we'll act according to our previous formation and attack together. Whoever gets the jade box first, regardless of whether it's me or fellow Taoist Huada, will give that fellow Taoist something of equal value. Second, even if we can't get it for now, we'll be able to block the cultivators who come here in the future. Yes, we'll listen to fellow Taoist Zhai Xing's orders." The dozens of nascent soul cultivators responded in unison. They moved their bodies and surrounded the entire volcano in a short while. At the same time when everyone had just surrounded him, several divine senses had already swept over from afar. They were the other surviving Dao sect cultivators, including Zhang Daoren, Sun Kong, and the others. "Do it." Zhai Xingzi's face turned serious. He knew that he didn't have much time left, so he waved his hand and ordered. Buzz. Buzz. Waves of magic treasures rumbled. The dozens of nascent soul cultivators each activated their natal magic treasures. The brilliance of the magic treasures was exceptionally dazzling, completely enveloping the entire volcano. The originally blazing volcano suddenly froze at this moment, as if it was suddenly frozen by a cold wind. The inscriptions floating in the flames also stopped in midair, like falling leaves frozen in a fiery red crystal. Boom! All kinds of magic treasures landed, causing a huge tremor. The mountain that was originally condensed from flames was suddenly hit until it shrunk. The full inscriptions melted layer by layer and were annihilated piece by piece under the power of the magic treasures. It was as if boiling water was poured onto snow. There was no resistance at all. Great! Zhai Xingzi was overjoyed. He activated his magic treasures and the multicolored light around him shone brightly. As he reached out his hand, a dragon-shaped brilliance rushed towards the fire mountain. In the blink of an eye, it was about to land on the jade box. But at this moment, the corner of Huada's eyes twitched slightly, as if he had sensed something. However, he smiled faintly. His eyes flashed with a hint of mockery, but he didn't say anything. "Ka ka ka." The sound of a rat gnawing on a table leg at night rang out. Layer after layer of inscriptions suddenly appeared in front of the cultivators. Each of the inscriptions emitted a solemn sound. When the sound gathered together, it actually caused the nascent soul cultivators to become absent-minded. Following the appearance of the inscriptions, strands of noble spirit condensed into the shape of crystal threads rushed out of the void and landed on the inscriptions. The inscriptions were like budding flower buds. The inscriptions that formed chapters were like rows of flower walls. However, the flower buds were fatal, and the flower walls were engraved with the names of the deceased. Boom, boom, boom. As the inscriptions exploded one by one, the waves of energy instantly drowned all the cultivators. Zhai Xingzi's cloud hand also couldn't escape the calamity. With a boom, inch by inch, it broke apart. Not good, Zhai Xingzi shouted. How could this happen? When Zhang Daoran and the others took the jade box, it didn't appear like this. Zhai Xingzi was shocked. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he activated his divine sense. Thousands of starlight appeared from the top of his head and turned into a huge hand that grabbed the exploding inscriptions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The huge hand fell. The inscriptions around the volcano also emitted a roaring sound. The noble spirit crystal threads exploded with great power. As soon as the huge hand touched the inscriptions, it was immediately blown apart by the noble spirit crystal threads. Fellow Taoist Huda, come and help me. Zhai Xingzi saw that Huda Zhai Xingzi was still activating an ordinary magic treasure. He couldn't help but frown and hurriedly called out. How could Huda Zhai Xingzi be willing to help? But now he had to act. Huda Zhai Xingzi shouted, Fellow Taoist Zhai Xing, don't worry. I will help you. As he spoke, Huda Zhai Xingzi also activated a huge hand that was condensed from flames. Its position was exactly opposite of Zhai Xingzi's. Of course, Huda Zhai Xingzi's hand was not as big as Zhai Xingzi's. The moment it touched the inscriptions, it immediately collapsed. At this moment, a nascent soul cultivator suddenly screamed. Above the volcano, a vast white gas rushed out and covered the nascent soul that had lost its physical body. It instantly dragged the nascent soul into the volcano and disappeared. Puff, puff. After a nascent soul cultivator died, the other nascent soul cultivators also endured the most difficult stage. They all activated their magic power and used their divine sense to escape from the attack of the inscriptions. When these cultivators came out, the terrifying inscriptions gradually disappeared as if they had never existed. The volcano that had been hit until it lost its light was now waving its fangs and brandishing its claws. As he looked at the group of cultivators with ghastly pale faces and the damaged magic treasures in their hands, a bitter taste arose in Zhai Xingzi's mouth. He understood in his heart that this last treasure was absolutely not as easy to obtain as the previous two. Zhai Xingzi wanted to give up, but he couldn't say it. This was not only a matter of face, but also a matter of life and death. Even if he didn't take this treasure, the Jade Pavilion Gathering's Dragon Gate would not open. They still had to stay here. Ha! Sun Kong Shangren's mocking voice came like a wave. You dare to go to the volcano without 3 inches? You're just a bunch of useless people, yet you want to covet the 3 great treasures? Are you defeated? If you can't, then quickly move aside and let this old man take it. Sun Kong Shangren's words really made Zhai Xingzi blush because these were the words he mocked Sun Kong Shangren when he first failed to take the treasure. However, Sun Kong Shangren then successfully took the jade box with Zhang Daoren. Now, Sun Kong Shangren was just returning the original words. Sun Kong Shangren's voice had already arrived, but he was still far away. Huda Zhai Xingzi heard it and his heart tightened. The first people he found were Sun Kong Shangren and Zhang Daoren. Unfortunately, Zhang Daoren didn't care about Huda Zhai Xingzi joining, but Sun Kong Shangren was extremely disgusted with Huda Zhai Xingzi. That kind of disgust was undisguised on his face. Huda Zhai Xingzi was also a late Yuanying stage cultivator. How could he bear this? After a few words, he flicked his sleeves and left. In his heart, he was extremely contemptuous of this group of people who were only a few dozen at that time. But what made Huda Zhai Xingzi surprised was that more and more people gathered around Zhang Daoren and Sun Kong Shangren, and more star formations were broken. Just as Huda Zhai Xingzi was about to coldly watch these 2 people being killed by Star Lord Palace, they unexpectedly took 2 treasures. At this time, Huda Zhai Xingzi almost suspected that Kong Hongwu of Star Lord Palace had changed his nature and began to favor the Taoist cultivators. However, whether it was the Crimson Star Great Formation or the Bright Moon Great Formation, the casualties of the Taoist cultivators didn't seem to be his guess. Therefore, Hua Dezhai Xingzi slightly shifted his target from killing Xiao Hua to the treasures. As for Zhai Xingzi, to be honest, Hua Dezhai Xingzi just wanted to make use of him. When Xiao Hua appeared, or when Xiao Hua was fighting with him for the treasures, he could borrow Zhai Xingzi's power to kill Xiao Hua. Zhai Xingzi was a little embarrassed. He looked at the jade box on the volcano in the distance, and then looked at the group of cultivators who were greatly injured. He thought about whether to continue or not. After all, before Sun Kong Shangren and the others arrived, they still had enough time to attack again. Fellow Zhai Xing, what are you hesitating for? If we don't attack now, when Zhang Daoran and the others arrive, how will we have a chance? What Zhai Xingzi urged from the side. Zhai Xingzi nodded. Fellow Zhai Xingzi is right. Previously, I didn't succeed. Now, it's up to you. When Hua Dezhai Xingzi heard this, he felt like vomiting blood. However, what Zhai Xingzi said was also right. Even if it was a round, it would still be his turn to attack. Hua Dezhai Xingzi smiled. He already had a plan in mind. He nodded and said, Fellow Zhai Xingzi is right. I also want to lead everyone to succeed. Unfortunately, my life source magic treasure was stolen by that bastard Xiao Hua. I only managed to stay alive by fleeing with all my might. Today, even if I use all of my magic power, I still won't be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with fellow Zhai Xingzi. How about this, fellow Zhai Xingzi, we don't have much time. This time, we must succeed in one strike. There can't be the slightest mistake. I'll be the main force, and fellow Zhai Xing will be the support. Why don't we attack together? Chapter 3662. After listening to Hua the Immortal's suggestion, Zhai Xingzi pondered. Hua the Immortal had said this before, and he had already regarded Xiao Hua as the scum of Taoism. Since Hua the Immortal did not have his natal magic treasure, his supernatural power would naturally be weakened. He would not be of much help. If it was before, he could take a few steps back and let Hua the Immortal try. But this time, he really did not have much time. Even if he had some grudges in his heart, he could only compromise. Okay. Zhai Xingzi nodded and pointed to the opposite side. Hua the Immortal will go to the opposite side. We will attack from both sides. Who is it? At this moment, Zhai Xingzi's eyes suddenly overflowed with faint starlight. He raised his head and looked at the clouds that were covered by flames in the distance. Between the two clouds, half of a face that was either angry or happy flashed past. Zhai Xingzi's heart felt as if it was struck by lightning. Instantly, his body became light and he could not breathe. It was as if thousands of mountains and ravines were stuffed into his chest. This face is so familiar. This person is so attractive. This person? Where have I seen him before? Zhai Xingzi's mind was turned upside down. He tried his best to find the memory of this half of the face. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he could not find the origin of this half of the face. However, the bitterness in his heart clearly told him that this person. He knew this person, and this person was deeply engraved in his heart. Fellow immortal Zhai Xingzi? Hua the Immortal did not see that half of the face, but he was a little panicked. He naturally knew that the scorching sun array was guarded by the celestial lords of Celestial Lord Palace. He did not know who the celestial lord above the clouds was, but he had a vague feeling that this celestial lord was probably Kong Hongwu himself or someone sent by Kong Hongwu to check on his performance. Therefore, he hurriedly reminded him, "What's wrong with you?" Nothing. Zhai Xingzi's heart could not help but beat wildly. He could not calm down for a moment. This was rare for a cultivator in the late stage of the nascent soul stage. Zhai Xingzi's answer was somewhat perfunctory. Zhai Xingzi frowned. Hua the Immortal was a little relieved. He smiled and said, "If there's nothing, we will prepare to set up the formation now." But Zhai Xingzi was still a little absent-minded. Hua Zhenren muttered in his heart. He looked at the clouds in the sky and flew to the other side of the volcano. Behind the clouds, Gusu Chiron's face was red and her hands were trembling. There was a strange look in her eyes and her heart was pounding. Who Who is this cultivator from the Taoist sect? How did he discover me? Even a cultivator of the 5th grade of essence energy wouldn't be able to notice my appearance. How can he see me at a glance? Moreover, why is his appearance so familiar? How could I have such a deep impression of a Taoist cultivator? Gusu Qiran couldn't help but blush at this thought. She was just as surprised as Zhai Xingzi. As a woman, she was far more sensitive to this feeling than Zhai Xingzi. Because of this, she was far more confused than Zhai Xingzi. After all, Zhai Xingzi's glance was truly shocking. Gusu Qiran just showed her face and Zhai Xingzi was already moved. This was definitely not an ordinary Taoist cultivator's spell. Seeing Huada, Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Qiran fly away, a cultivator standing not far from Zhai Xingzi hurriedly transmitted his voice. Fellow Taoist Zhai Xing, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. Zhai Xingzi calmed himself down and nodded. Oh, fellow Taoist Withered Tree, you and I are in the same boat now. Just say it. The cultivator named Withered Tree thought for a moment and said, I'm worried about Huada Immortal. I feel like he is hiding something. Zhai Xingzi's expression didn't change and said faintly, Fellow Taoist, just say it. I believe fellow Taoist knows what a life-bound magic treasure is just like me. How could it be taken so easily? And from what Huada Immortal said, Xiaohua's cultivation is higher than his. But why haven't we seen him yet? If that Xiaohua had already fallen within this defensive formation, then how did he, Taoist Huada, escape? Taoist Withered Tree did not say much, and only pointed out this one sentence. Zhai Xingzi sighed and looked at Huada Immortal. After all, he is a Taoist cultivator. At this time, I have no choice but to believe him. Although I know he might want to use our power to achieve his goal, now is the time to join hands. But rest assured, fellow Taoist Withered Tree, if there is anything wrong with Huada, I'll be the first to kill him. But Withered Tree Taoist nodded and looked at the cultivators in the distance and sighed. Our magic power is almost exhausted and we are also exhausted. This last rare treasure. A trace of displeasure flashed across Zhai Xingzi's face and he said, Confucian cultivators have a saying, the first drum is the best, the second is the worst, and the third is the worst. We have only just attacked for the second time. How can fellow Taoists say we are defeated? Zhai Xingzi was displeased and his majesty was revealed. Withered Tree Taoist's heart skipped a beat and he didn't dare to say anything more. He closed his mouth and began to channel his magic power. Zhai Xingzi flew forward and said with a smile, Fellow Taoists, we have already seen the power of this defense formation. But as the saying goes, the first drum is the best, the second is the worst, and the third is the worst. This defense formation is the same. When we are tired, the power of the defense formation will also decrease. What is placed in front of us is our last chance. We must seize it. Of course, like before, I still have to remind all of you that if something is wrong, immediately retreat. There is no need to fight like a cornered beast. Your lives are the most important. No matter how precious this rare treasure is, it is still an external object. Yes, we understand. Once Zhai Xingzi spoke, everyone's heart trembled. This kind of innate majesty was not something that could be cultivated later on. However, before they could set up the formation again, Zhang Daoren, Venerable Sun Kong, and the others had already turned into rainbows and arrived. In other directions, several cultivators also flew over and stood in midair. It had to be said that these Taoist cultivators had learned a lot from this Jade Pavilion meeting. They didn't rush forward to snatch the treasures like before, nor did they plot against them. They all abided by the established rules and quietly waited for Zhai Xingzi and the others to make their last attempt. Seeing that Venerable Sun Kong was still mocking them just now but was now standing obediently by Zhang Daren's side, Zhai Xingzi suddenly sighed with emotion. It seemed that he should also be standing there. Zhai Xingzi. Venerable Sun Kong saw Zhai Xingzi looking at him and said coldly, "This is your last attempt. If you fail, it will be my turn. There is no chance for you to wait." Zhai Xingzi also retorted. On the other hand, Zhang Daoren looked around and looked at the last surviving cultivators. He said, "Fellow Taoist Zhai Xingzi, actually, I don't think you guys will succeed. You have to try first. Zhai Xingzi didn't wait for Zhang Daoran to finish and immediately interrupted him. He said coldly, "If I fail, you will succeed?" Zhang Daoran wasn't angry. He smiled and said, "To tell you the truth, I don't have the confidence either." Zhai Xingzi was a little confused. He didn't understand what Zhang Daoran meant. Zhang Daoran raised his voice and said, "Fellow Taoist, we all saw your first attempt. Since you failed the first time, you may not succeed the second or third time. Besides, this flame formation is the next stage of the Jade Pavilion meeting. The Confucian cultivators of Star Lord Palace definitely won't let us pass easily. If we don't gather our strength and break the formation together, I'm afraid there will be many fellow Taoists who will die here." "I understand what you mean." Zhai Xingzi was a little tempted. He indeed didn't have the slightest bit of confidence. However, at this moment, Perfected Huada said from afar, "Fellow Taoist Zhai Xingzi, I am ready. We can begin now." Exalted Sun Kong snorted and said, "Zhai Xingzi, if you want to die, then hurry up and do it." Zhai Xingzi's face turned cold. He slapped his forehead, and a star-shaped artifact soared into the sky. The starlight twinkled, and countless chi of heaven and earth gathered. Hiss! Exalted Sun Kong saw this and sucked in a breath of cold air. He transmitted his voice to Zhang Daoran. "Brother Daoran, this Zhai Xingzi seems to have reached the peak of 4th grade essence force. I'm afraid he won't lose to you." Zhang Daoran smiled proudly. Zhai Xingzi's artifact is the falling star. It is known as the artifact closest to a spirit artifact in the Dao sect. My artifact can't compare. Ha! Exalted Sun Kong laughed loudly. How could he not know the meaning behind Zhang Daoran's words? Exalted Sun Kong's laughter had just sounded when Zhai Xingzi's artifact, the falling star, turned into a fist and smashed towards the volcano. On the other side of the volcano, Hu Jinren also activated his flaming hand, and together with Zhai Xingzi's fist, they attacked the jade box on the volcano. Seeing this, the other cultivators hurriedly activated their magic power again. Right at this moment, something strange happened again. Boom boom. A huge sound came from the mountain of flames in the distance. Before everyone could turn their heads to look, a terrifying aura suddenly came from that place. Not only did all the cultivators tremble and fall a few feet, even half of the flames in the scorching sun grand array were extinguished by this aura. Set up the array. Exalted Sun Kong saw the opportunity quickly and roared. He thought it was Star Lord Hall's killer. Before Zhang Daoran and the other cultivators could fly, they saw a huge light pillar soar into the sky. It passed through the flames and the clouds in the sky and disappeared. This is... Everyone saw that the fear disappeared along with the light pillar like a receding tide. They were very puzzled. However, Zhang Daoran and the others set up the array. The other cultivators also set up the array and were on guard. Rumble! Just as the light disappeared, the entire scorching sun formation began to tremble again. Volcanoes collapsed one after another, clouds turned into streams of fire and fell from the sky. Forests turned into fiery ponds that spiraled in the air. Everyone turned pale with fright. They were somewhat at a loss. Chapter 3663. Zhang Daoran's expression also changed when he saw such a huge change in the array. He scanned the array with his divine sense and exchanged glances with Venerable Sun Kong. Both of their eyes were filled with bitterness. This time, the collapse of the array was a little different from the previous one. It was completely disorderly and there was no trace to speak of. Moreover, their divine senses had just scanned a few miles when they were immediately defeated by the aura of the collapse. They couldn't go far. Even if they wanted to escape, they would be like headless flies. Oh no! Before they could withdraw their divine senses, the entire space was torn apart. Their divine senses were also cut off in the broken space. Zhang Daoran and Venerable Sun Kong's divine senses were damaged. Their faces were pale. They hurriedly waved their hands and wanted to escape with the other cultivators. At this moment, a loud sound came from beside them. They quickly turned around and saw the volcano where the jade box was located collapse. The space around the volcano was broken and shattered like glass. Thousands of inscriptions surged out of the void. These inscriptions were immediately torn into pieces by the space cracks before they could trigger the noble spirit. Haha. While the other cultivators were at a loss, Zhai Xingzi let out a wild laugh. The big hand formed by the starlight grabbed the jade box that was flowing with the fire in the volcano. Layers of extraordinary colors bloomed from the jade box. Good. Venerable Sun Kong couldn't help but praise. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. After all, they had obtained the last rare treasure. The Jade Pavilion gathering was about to end. The dragon gate that would send everyone out would inevitably appear. This collapsing space would naturally stop. Just as everyone's heart settled, they heard Zhai Xingzi's miserable scream. A space crack appeared out of nowhere between Zhai Xingzi's big hand and instantly cut the big hand apart. Zhai Xingzi's expression changed drastically. Woo! Huodazhenren reacted quickly. The flaming hand hurriedly grabbed the jade box that Zhai Xingzi had let go. Zhai Xingzi helplessly waved his hand and the falling star turned into a speck of starlight and flew back to Zhai Xingzi's eyes. Zhai Xingzi's miserable scream caused everyone's hearts to skip a beat. Because the dragon gate was gone and the space was still collapsing, their way out did not appear. What's going on? At this moment, Zhang Daoran was no longer interested in any treasures. All he wanted to do was to escape. The hundreds of cultivators around him were the same. Unfortunately, the collapse of the scorching sun formation was far beyond their expectations. Spatial cracks appeared one after another, turning the formation into pieces. They gradually separated from each other and even became further and further apart. Waves of inscriptions and clusters of flames rushed out again, blocking everyone's line of sight. A golden core cultivator was caught in the flames in a panic. He screamed as his body was corroded. The flames quickly killed him. Immediately afterward, several more golden core disciples were killed by the spatial rifts. They didn't even have the chance to scream. At a place several miles away from Zhang Daoran, Daoist Yuan Qing, Hong Songzi, and Hai Hongzi were watching from afar with a group of gold core disciples. These three nascent soul cultivators had already reached an agreement outside of Yaodai Mountain, and they had also refined a type of joint offensive magical item. Therefore, after they met up with the Crimson Star Grand Formation, they had enough power to protect themselves. After that, they gathered another group of gold core cultivators and rushed here. Naturally, they wouldn't covet the rare treasure anymore. They just wanted to follow Zhang Daoran and get out of the Yaotai gathering safely. At this time, they were also facing a disaster. Seeing that more people were about to die, they also released their magic treasures and other objects to resist. Fellow Taoist, dodge. Taoist Yuan Qing's sharp eyes saw a flame rushing out of the void. He hurriedly shouted at Hong Songzi, who was next to him. Hong Songzi was shocked. His figure suddenly turned into a rainbow and fled into the distance. When he saw Hong Songzi turn into a rainbow, Hai Hongzi became anxious and immediately transmitted a message. Fellow Taoist, stop. However, before his voice could reach Hong Songzi's ears, several spatial cracks suddenly appeared and landed on Hong Songzi's body in the blink of an eye. Gotcha! Hong Songzi's treasured clothes blossomed with aqua-blue brilliance and instantly shattered. His corporeal body was also torn apart along with the treasured clothes that fluttered away. Chirp! A nascent soul cultivator wearing a treasured armor flew out of his body at the critical moment. His small face was full of panic. Taoist Yuan Qing's heart turned cold. When he saw that Hong Songzi's nascent soul did not disappear and was not sucked away by the huge suction force, he could not help but be slightly stunned. Gotcha! Just as Taoist Yuan Qing was about to fly towards Hong Songzi, another huge spatial crack appeared. Hong Songzi's nascent soul had just turned blurry, and before he could use his teleportation technique, he was immediately swallowed by the darkness of the spatial crack. Not only that, but a huge flame rushed out from the spatial rift and separated Taoist Yuan Qing and Hai Hongzi. Taoist Yuan Qing was surrounded by red clouds and flames. Damn it! Taoist Yuan Qing cursed angrily. He waved his hand and the broken halberd appeared in his hand. A water-blue brilliance flew out from the halberd and rushed toward the flame. Bang! 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 A violent explosion sounded. The flame was shattered and a small gap appeared. Taoist Yuan Qing did not have time to identify where the gap led to and was about to rush in. At this moment, a strange sword sound came from the clouds below him, and then it became quiet. In a moment, the crimson clouds surged violently, and a slender figure rushed out from the clouds. Xiao. Taoist Xiao? Taoist Yuan Qing's face lit up when he saw the familiar appearance and figure. He hurriedly flew over. However, before he could reach Xiao Hua, Taoist Yuan Qing stopped in his tracks. This was because Xiao Hua was lying on top of the clouds as soon as he rushed out. His eyes were tightly shut, and there was no breath coming from his mouth or nose. Moreover, his face was pale, and his Taoist robe was in tatters. There were clearly several wounds on his exposed skin that went deep into his body. Xiao Hua was seriously injured. Seeing that Xiao Hua was seriously injured, the joy on Taoist Yuan Qing's face disappeared and was replaced by an extremely strange green and red color and hesitation. Xiao Hua, wake up. Taoist Yuan Qing did not go to help but called out in a low voice. Unfortunately, Taoist Yuan Qing called out a few times but Xiao Hua did not respond at all. Taoist Yuan Qing saw this and bit his lips. His eyes narrowed and the halberd in his hand faintly glowed. Little Confucian cultivator, what are you doing? Inside Xiao Hua's body, the green-robed Xiao Hua controlled his nascent soul to repair his dantian. He was shocked when he saw the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua actually withdrew his sword form and fell here. You know Jade Archive Xiao Hua is somewhat guarded against this bastard. How can you expose our true bodies in front of him? Haha, this is called loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua said proudly, fellow immortal Jade Archive Xiao Hua doesn't know what this bastard is thinking, right? You don't know whether his actions in the defensive formation are friend or foe, right? If he makes a move this time, won't the truth come to light? Rest assured, fellow immortal green robe, how can he injure our true bodies with his cultivation alone? Xiao Hua. Taoist Yuan Qing clenched his teeth and roared as if he had made a decision. But he moved his hand and then stopped. After all, Xiao Hua had already played dead twice in front of him. How could he dare to take the risk after killing Jing Muhu and Taoist Chu? After thinking for a while, Taoist Yuan Qing carefully took out a jade bottle from his bosom and said in a low voice, Taoist Xiao, I have some healing pills here. As he spoke, he walked toward Xiao Hua's body. The tip of the small halberd in his hand was pointed at Xiao Hua's forehead. Damn it. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua cursed. This bastard is too cunning. What is he trying to do? Alas, Confucian cultivator, you and I are fellow Taoist Jade Archives clones after all. We don't know much about human nature. The green-robed Xiao Hua sighed. Don't think about it. Just kill him. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's tone was rather regretful. Although he was well-read and thoughtful, his understanding of human nature was much worse than Xiao Hua's. Don't worry. Suddenly, Subhoodie, who had been hiding in the exquisite pagoda all this time, shouted, There's a good show. Good. The green-robed Xiao Hua smiled. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua also praised, It's fate that brought us together. Sure enough, just as Taoist Yuan Qing was about to approach Xiao Hua's body, another kacha sound rang out. Several cracks appeared in a corner of the space fragment, causing it to collapse. At the same time, another fragment was connected to this one. Taoist Yuan Qing suddenly raised his eyebrows. He looked at the space fragment that had just rushed over with great vigilance. His figure hastily flew back and landed in the gap that had just collapsed. Ouch! Just as Taoist Yuan Qing left, a woman with flames burning on her body staggered and flew down from the distance. Wasn't this the extremely beautiful Fairy Jing that Xiao Hua had seen before? Fairy Jing landed on the clouds. Her body was slanted as if she was injured. At the same time, a multicolored light appeared on her palm and was about to fall on the flames on her body. However, when Fairy Jing's gaze fell on the unconscious Xiao Hua's face, she even forgot about extinguishing the fire. She cried out in alarm, "Xiao Hua!" Carrying the flames on her body, she rushed to the side of the clouds. "Tsk. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smacked his lips and said with admiration, "We've only met a few times. It can't be this bad." With that, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua opened his mouth and a stream of true qi rushed out from somewhere in Xiao Hua's body and landed on Fairy Jing's body. The inscriptions on the flames were shattered by this true qi and the flames extinguished themselves. Fairy Jing landed beside Xiao Hua and didn't hesitate to place her white hand on Xiao Hua's lower dantian. This made the green-robed Xiao Hua hesitate. Xiao Hua himself would never allow others to inspect his dantian like this. However, Fairy Jing was very concerned and worried about Xiao Hua, which made the green-robed Xiao Hua hesitate. During this moment of hesitation, Fairy Jing's true qi landed on Xiao Hua's dantian. Ah! Fairy Jing was dumbfounded. Her face was filled with disbelief because the green-robed Xiao Hua had intentionally placed that true qi on the part of his dantian that hadn't been repaired. How could Fairy Jing not know what it was like for a late-stage nascent soul cultivator to have his dantian shattered and his nascent soul missing? A kind of sadness and discomfort appeared in Fairy Jing's heart. Her eyes were somewhat red. Chapter 3664. Just as the green-robed Xiao Hua was about to speak to the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua's body suddenly moved. He circulated his cultivation method and forced out Fairy Jing's true yuan. The green-robed Xiao Hua knew that Jade Archive Xiao Hua had awakened. Everything was about to end. Fairy Jing's heart was filled with grief. She didn't notice that the flames on her body had extinguished, nor did she notice that her true yuan had been forced out. She saw Xiao Hua's eyelids blink a few times and slowly open. She hastily changed into a cheerful smile and forced herself to say, "Xiao Hua, you're awake?" "Fairy Jing?" Xiao Hua saw Fairy Jing's smiling face and didn't understand for a moment. However, when he heard her words, he understood the whole story. He glanced at her and said, Why are you here? Where is this place?" "Oh, this is the last great formation of the Jade Mountain. The last treasure has already been taken by Hua the Taoist." Fairy Jing hastily replied. "However, the Dragon Gate of the Jade Pavilion gathering hasn't appeared yet. The entire Great Formation is collapsing and all the cultivators are in a mess." Xiao Hua heard this and couldn't help but smile helplessly. Nonsense, Kong Hongwu was killed by him. How could the Dragon Gate of the Jade Pavilion gathering appear? As soon as he woke up, he met Fairy Jing and didn't have a chance to see Kong Hongwu's Qiankuan bag. Of course, he didn't know how to open the Dragon Gate. "Xiao Hua, how did you get here?" "Just now? No, I haven't seen you for a year." Fairy Jing hastily asked as if she was afraid that she wouldn't have the time to ask in this life. Xiao Hua laughed bitterly once more and said in a low voice, "I was injured by the boulders in the rockfall formation, and then I lost consciousness. Now that I've just woken up, I presume all the grand formations were destroyed, and I was sent out as well? Ouch, my dantian." When Xiao Hua finished speaking, he actually cried out in alarm, as if no one else could hear him. "Shoo!" Fairy Jing was anxious and whispered, "Xiao Hua, don't say anything. Your dantian is broken and your cultivation is no longer there. What a Taoist and the others are not far away. You mustn't let them know. I'll take you to find Senior Taoist and the others first." But Xiao Hua's face was filled with panic as he hurriedly agreed. With Fairy Jing's help, he struggled to get up. Wind blew through the gap between the flames in the distance as if someone was about to enter. At this moment, there was a boom. It was the sound of waves crashing into the mountain rocks that the Taoist cultivators were very familiar with. Everyone's vision darkened. Then, a meteor soared into the sky and crashed into the crimson flames. The entire crimson sky shook violently. A huge black hole flashed with a golden frame. The meteor turned into a huge sun in the black hole. A three-legged golden crow flashed in the sun. Then the entire sun fell into the black hole and disappeared. A dazzling brilliance rushed out from the black hole. This brilliance was like a rainbow bridge. One end of the rainbow bridge was placed on the black hole, and the other end landed on the collapsed array. The strange thing was that as soon as the rainbow bridge fell, the entire disintegrating array stopped splitting. All the flames, inscriptions, and spatial cracks froze. Is this the Dragon Gate? Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. After all, he was already looking through Kong Hongwu's Qiankuan bag. Let's go! Fairy Jing didn't care about this. She roared and dragged Xiao Hua to where the rainbow bridge fell. Below the rainbow bridge stood Zhai Xingzi. At this moment, Zhai Xingzi didn't step on the rainbow bridge. Instead, he looked up at the place where the meteor had come from. That place was filled with crimson clouds, so he couldn't see anything. However, Zhai Xingzi clearly saw that behind the clouds, there was a woman whose face was also covered in red clouds. Fairy Jing had just left with Xiao Hua when the ashen-faced Taoist Yuan Qing emerged from behind the solidified flames. He fiercely stomped his feet on the clouds with a remorseful look on his face. Soon after, he flew up and carefully covered his tracks as he followed behind Fairy Jing. This isn't the Dragon Gate. Taoist Huda stood not too far away from Zhai Xingzi and coldly said, "This is Star-Lord Palace's trap." The cultivators who had left the Jade Pavilion gathering didn't move. Although the cultivators who hadn't seen the Dragon Gate open before were tempted, they still stopped after hearing Taoist Huda's words. The entire world was silent. Not a single sound could be heard. Zhai Xingzi's eyes narrowed. He shifted his gaze away from the clouds and stepped on them as he sang, "A 1,000-year withered tree doesn't see water. A 10,000-year ancient well doesn't have ripples. Today, when the withered tree meets spring, the stagnant water ripples. My heart is firm." The onlookers were bewildered. Above the clouds, Gusuchiran bit her lips. Her face was so red that it seemed like it would drip water at any moment. She moaned, "Damn it. Although I don't know why I'm willing to give up everything for you, with your words, I'm satisfied to wander the world." Taoist Zhai Xing, be careful. Taoist Huda seemed to be worried. Zhai Xingzi wasn't afraid at all. He waved his sleeve and said, "You don't believe me, but I do. Who else wants to come up?" "I'm coming." At this time, Xiao Hua flew over with Fairy Jing. Fairy Jing's face was also red and hot. She wasn't inferior to Gusuchiran, who was hiding behind the clouds. After all, she was carrying a male cultivator in front of so many cultivators. Although Fairy Jing was carrying Xiao Hua, in order to cover it up, Xiao Hua and Fairy Jing were holding hands. This kind of intimacy was really moving. "Hey, Taoist Xiao, please." Zhai Xingzi laughed and waved his hand. Fairy Jing and Xiao Hua passed through the crowd and landed on the rainbow bridge. "Xiao Hua!" Taoist Huda bit his lips and fiercely looked at Xiao Hua. An indescribable feeling arose in his heart. He couldn't help but want to fly up. "Oh, Brother Xiao, you're still alive?" Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong were both doubtful. Seeing Xiao Hua suddenly appear with Fairy Jing, they were pleasantly surprised and immediately flew onto the rainbow bridge. With Xiao Hua here, they had an indescribable confidence. Taoist Xiao has come? The group of nascent soul cultivators and gold core cultivators behind Zhang Daoran were all boiling with excitement. Those who had seen Xiao Hua's great display of invincible might within the rockfall formation all rushed onto the rainbow bridge one after another. Those who hadn't seen him before had long since been talked about by these cultivators to the point that calluses grew on their ears. Seeing Xiao Hua, who was more powerful than Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong, leave, how could they still stay? "Xiao Hua." Taoist Huda clenched his teeth and also helplessly braced himself to fly onto the rainbow bridge. He knew in his heart that although this wasn't Kong Hongwu's Dragon Gate, since others had gone up, he couldn't not go up. However, he was still curious. What exactly was this rainbow bridge? If he was in danger, would Kong Hongwu help? The rainbow bridge didn't move and stabilized the collapse of the blazing fire formation. Zhai Xingzi and the others rushed into the black hole and quickly disappeared. After all the cultivators had left, Gusuchiran also appeared from the clouds. She turned to look at the fire and debris under her feet and clapped her hands. A cloud fell from the sky and a moment later, a woman in a Taoist robe flew out from the cloud. A broken star armor fell from the cloud. When Gusuchiron landed on the Rainbow Bridge slowly shrank and disappeared into the black hole. Gusuchiron silently looked at the collapsing formation and frowned. She was very surprised. Kong Hongwu, where did he go? Could it be that something big happened to Star-Lord Palace? Right now, I'm afraid this is the best time for me to escape from Star-Lord Palace. When Gusuchiron's figure disappeared, the blazing sun formation began to boil and collapse again. There was indeed no one inside the formation, whether it was Taoist cultivators or Star-Lord Palace's immortal soldiers. However, Gusuchiron was wrong. She knew that the scorching sun formation was set by the immortal generals of the immortal palaces. The Confucian cultivators of Celestial Lord Hall, from Kong Hongwu to the Celestial Lord guarding the formation, couldn't pry into it. Thus, she boldly used the so-called peach zombie Li Meng to escape. However, she didn't know that after the Lianyao pot escaped, the formation under Yaotai Mountain had already collapsed and the connection between the sun, moon, and star formation was gradually disappearing. On the Yaotai Mountain, within the palace, Linghu Pairan was standing before the mirror with an indifferent expression. Although the things on the mirror appeared to be rather indistinct, Linghu Pairan was holding his chin with one hand. He was looking at all of this in a very thought-provoking manner. His eyes contained a sneer, confusion, and even a trace of concern. The light from the Lianyao pot rushed out of Yaotai Mountain and quickly disappeared into the void. The heavenly general's primordial spirit shadow followed behind like a real person. When it reached the sky, it opened its mouth and a palm-sized imperial equipment flew out. This imperial equipment was in the shape of a flying shuttle, and a layer of light purple clouds appeared on top of it. The heavenly general's body swayed, and the entire primordial spirit shadow entered the imperial equipment. Buzz! The flying shuttle let out a strong roar, and the space within a few feet showed slight distortions. A huge pillar of vast chi fell into the flying shuttle from all directions. Whoosh! The flying shuttle didn't move at all, and it crashed into the void and disappeared. After an unknown amount of time, the flying shuttle that was flying forward at an extremely fast speed in the void suddenly hit an invisible enchantment. Circles of 9-colored light rippled in all directions in the void. Even the void was extremely distorted. When the flying shuttle entered the restriction, it suddenly slowed down, and an extremely long shadow appeared. The originally palm-sized flying shuttle was stretched to 1,000 feet long. The rumbling sound of the flying shuttle also became muffled and erratic at this point. Then, thousands of light spots flew out from the flying shuttle. Layers of inscriptions bloomed like an epiphyllum. Ripples appeared on the left side of the flying shuttle. The light spots scattered around the flying shuttle rushed into the depths of the sea and disappeared without a trace. There was a palace made of silver, and the surroundings were filled with light green clouds. The brilliance of the clouds was like the sky, illuminating the surroundings. The palace's vermilion door was extremely large. Above the vermilion door of the palace, there was a bright plaque with 3 inscriptions, Jasper Flower Palace. An indescribable majesty was emitted from these 3 inscriptions, covering a range of several hundred feet in front of the palace. Chapter 3665. Behind the towering palace gate were layers upon layers of pavilions and pavilions. They were dazzling, exquisite, and majestic. In the clouds above the pavilions, colorful phoenixes danced gracefully, followed by hundreds of other immortal birds. Their cries entered one's ears. On the ground inside the palace, clouds were also rolling. They seemed to be evergreen immortal grasses. Immortal trees were everywhere, giving off a clear light and a delicate fragrance. In the palace, many young women dressed in palace dresses of various colors were holding jade bottles, rui scepters, and other things. They were flying around on auspicious clouds. Similarly, there were also many young children playing or weeding beside the immortal grasses. It was indeed the auspicious and aura of immortals. It seemed that everything was normal. At this moment, in an extremely secret pavilion in the palace, a strange brilliance suddenly flashed. Then, the crackling sound of firewood being roasted on a bonfire could be heard. Then, from the corridor outside the pavilion, A woman in her 20s flew in at an extremely fast speed. She was as beautiful as a flower, and her watery peach blossom eyes flashed with a seductive smile. When the woman saw the brilliance in the pavilion and the bright clouds that were constantly gushing out from the noise, her face lit up with joy. But then she frowned slightly and raised her left hand. Her fingers that were whiter than snowflakes quickly bent. In just a moment, the woman's face changed greatly. She almost cried out in surprise, "What? Isn't there still a few hours left? Why did this thing suddenly fly back?" After saying that, the woman's face became ferocious, and the sweet smile disappeared in an instant. Then, the woman flew to the pavilion. However, before she could get close, layers of tiny inscriptions gushed out from all over the pavilion, forming a huge chain armor. The chain armor shone brightly, and each ray of light was like a sharp sword, blocking the woman's path. Alas! The woman's eyes turned slightly, and then she seemed to have thought of something. She stepped on an auspicious cloud, rushed out of the pavilion, and flew directly to the palace gate of Jasper Flower Palace. Along the way, many palace maids stopped on their clouds and stood quietly to greet her. The woman looked hurried and didn't pay any attention to them at all, causing these palace maids to lower their heads and whisper to each other. After a while, the woman returned from outside the palace with a strange expression. She rushed into the depths of the palace and only stopped when she came to a small door. She lowered her cloud and took a deep breath. She walked to the door and lowered her head. Gu Xianyun requests to see the princess. After a while, a young and beautiful woman walked out of the small door and said with a smile, "Sister Xianyun, the princess is not in the palace today. If you have something to do, you can come in 3 days." Ah! Hearing this, Gu Xianyun's face changed and he begged, "Sister Xia Jing, where did the princess go? Little sister has an urgent matter here. I want to report this to the princess as soon as possible. If there's any delay, I won't be able to keep my life." Hearing this, the woman's face turned serious and she asked anxiously, "Xianyun, what happened?" However, this was only said out of impatience. After saying this, the woman quickly said, "Oh, Xianyun, you don't have to explain it to me." Then she took Gu Xianyun's hand and comforted him, "Don't worry, sister. It's only 3 days. The princess will be back soon. Sister Yu, 3 days? 3 days is 3 years?" Gu Xianyun blurted out, but he didn't say it out loud. Hearing this, Yu Xiajing immediately understood. Of course, she also knew the key point. However, she still shook her head slightly. "Sister Xianyun, it's not that I don't want to send a message to you. It's the princess who doesn't allow it. Yesterday, the princess went to the school of the Emperor Star with Princess Miao Miao. Do you think I can go to the school of the Emperor Star to send a message?" Alas! Hearing the school of the Emperor Star, Gu Xianyun immediately lowered his head and muttered, "Princess Qingqing has always been at odds with the school of the Emperor Star. If I go to send a message, I'll be seeking death. Both of them will die. Which one do you choose?" Yu Xiajing blinked and looked at Gu Xianyun. Gu Xianyun froze and then pondered. After a while, he bowed and said, "Thank you for your reminder, sister. Everything will be decided after the princess comes back." "Yes, that's right. Don't be too anxious." Yu Xiajing nodded with a smile. "Although I don't know what kind of task you're doing for the princess, there's no need to rush. However, since it's a task, there's a possibility that you'll screw it up. Then, I'll have to see how badly I screw it up. Imagine if I made any mistakes and how the princess will punish me. The princess empathizes with us the most. She won't be too harsh on us." Gu Xianyun smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "Actually, I'm not sure either. However, perhaps it's not as serious as I think. Elder sister, if the princess comes back, can you take a look at her mood before you inform this little sister? You're making things difficult for me." Yu Xiajing smiled even more bitterly. When has the princess ever come back with a smile from the school of the Emperor Star? "Sister, you're just making things difficult for me. My life is at stake." Gu Xianyun begged, "Sister, you must think for me." "Sister Xianyun, go ahead. I'll remember this." Yu Xiajing smiled. "Everything will be fine after the heaven selection." "Yes, thank you, sister." Gu Xianyun squeezed out a smile. After Yu Xiajing entered the small door, he walked out of the small courtyard with displeasure on his face. Then, he flew to the pavilion from before and waited there quietly. After a while, Gu Xianyun flew up from the ground again. With a cold smile on his face, he muttered, "No, I can't just wait here like this. That thing has come back. Although it's early, it's not a big mistake. However, I'm afraid only Kong Hongwu knows what happened at Yaodai Mountain. If I don't get to the bottom of this, when the princess asks, how can I answer?" As he spoke, Gu Xianyun flew into a corridor and disappeared. Poor Xiaohua didn't know that the trouble this time actually involved the princess of the Immortal Palace. He followed Fairy Jing onto the Rainbow Bridge. Naturally, Fairy Jing took him and flew behind Zhai Xingzi. Although Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong Shangren were behind them, they just looked at each other and didn't say anything. After they flew across the Rainbow Bridge and rushed into the huge black hole, just like when they entered Yaodai Mountain, light and shadow flashed. As if they had passed through many small worlds, a vast mountain range appeared in front of Xiaohua and the others. Woo woo! At this moment, the north wind was blowing above the mountain range. Large snowflakes fell from the sky. Before they could land, they were torn to pieces by the wind. A gust of cold air rushed into Xiaohua's mouth and nose. Xiaohua took a deep breath. It was really a refreshing feeling. "I'm Zhai Xingzi. I didn't ask for your Dharma name." Zhai Xingzi flew in front. After he left Yaodai Mountain, he scanned with his divine sense and a smile appeared on his face. He looked at Xiaohua holding hands with Fairy Jing and said with a smile, "I really envy your intimacy with your lover." The blush on Fairy Jing's face increased. She pulled back her hand and didn't dare to take it back. She opened her mouth to say something but didn't know how to refute. She simply lowered her head and didn't say anything. Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "I'm Xiaohua. My Dharma name is Taoist Xiao." "Xiaohua." Zhai Xingzi frowned. A cold smile immediately appeared on his face. "So you're Xiaohua." Not bad, not bad." Zhai Xingzi said not bad, but his face was full of disdain. "How was that not bad? What's the meaning of this, Taoist?" Xiaohua was somewhat bewildered. Just as he was about to speak, Zhai Xingzi flung his sleeve and said coldly, "I originally thought you were a forthright person. Who knew? Your heart was actually dirty. Alas, you can't judge a book by its cover." After saying that, he urged his figure and flew to the other side of the foothills. "Is this guy sick?" Xiaohua was completely at a loss and couldn't help but say in a low voice. Fairy Jing on the side chuckled and said, "Previously on Yaodai Mountain, Zhai Xingzi was together with Taoist Huda. He must have heard Taoist Huda's ugly words." I was wondering." Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. He tilted his head and looked at the rippling water like air behind him. The cultivators flew out one by one. He smiled and said, "Fairy Jing, do you think I should kill Taoist Huda right now?" If Taoist Huda hadn't been mentioned, Fairy Jing wouldn't have thought about it. However, when she looked back, she found that except for her and Xiaohua, who followed closely behind Zhai Xingzi, the other cultivators didn't fly out of the Yaotai meeting in the same order as on the Rainbow Bridge. Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong Shangren weren't behind them at all. "This is bad." Fairy Jing hurriedly urged her magic power to fly away. While flying, she scolded, "You still want to find trouble? It's good enough that Taoist Huda didn't find trouble with us." Xiaohua touched his nose and smiled bitterly. However, after thinking for a moment, he still pretended that he had lost his cultivation. Fortunately, Fairy Jing didn't have to worry for long. A moment later, several powerful divine senses swept over. Two of them were Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong Shangren. The two turned into rainbows and rushed over from afar. The other divine senses were somewhat resentfully retracted. "Brother Xiao!" Sun Kong Shangren shouted without flying close, "You're really good. It seems that Fairy Jing was still beside this old man just a moment ago. In just a few breaths of time, you actually, Senior Sun Kong?" Fairy Jing's face was very red. She hurriedly flew over with Xiaohua and shouted, "Senior, quickly come and take a look." Xiaohua, at this point, Fairy Jing changed to transmitting her voice. Zhang Daoran was naturally more attentive than Sun Kong Shangren. When he saw that Xiao Hua wasn't flying and was being carried by Fairy Jing, he already felt something was wrong. Without waiting for Fairy Jing to transmit her voice, he hurriedly flew over to Xiao Hua and raised his hand to check Xiao Hua's injuries. However, at this moment, Zhang Daoran stopped and looked at Xiao Hua with a stunned expression. At this moment, Xiao Hua's lips were slightly moving as if he was explaining something. Xiao Hua didn't say much and only said a few words. Zhang Daoran slightly frowned. He looked at Fairy Jing and then at Sun Kong Shangren. His expression was very serious as he said, "Brother Sun Kong, do you have any medicinal pills?" Chapter 3666. When Sun Kong heard this, he shook his head slightly and said with a bitter smile, "Brother Daoran, you really think too highly of me. My Denan is destroyed, and my nascent soul. I'm afraid it will also be greatly damaged. Not to mention completely obliterated, even if I lose an arm or a leg, to completely recover, not only will I need to take a nascent soul pill, but I also need to cultivate for hundreds of years to fully recover. That nascent soul pill is a legendary immortal pill. I've only heard of it and never seen it, but..." At this point, Sun Kong hesitated and said in a low voice, "I know a secret recipe to use the nascent soul of a cultivator who just became a nascent soul. Hee hee." Xiao Hua laughed and hurriedly waved his hand. He gave Zhang Daoran a look and then said to Sun Kong, "No need to trouble Brother Sun Kong, I have a medicinal pill here. Although it's not as good as the nascent soul pill that fellow Taoist mentioned, it has an excellent effect on rebuilding the Dantian. I just haven't had a chance to take it. After a while, I'll find a place to take it. Although it can't be completely recovered in a short time, it's possible to use magic power and divine sense." "Brother Xiao, what medicinal pill is this?" Zhang Daoran was transmitting his voice to Sun Kong. Before Zhang Daoran could explain clearly, Sun Kong heard Xiao Hua showing off and hurriedly spoke. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was scolded by Zhang Daoran. Sun Kong's face also showed embarrassment. After all, both of them felt that Xiao Hua was making an excuse. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hua raised his hand and took out a jade bottle from his bosom. He said with a smile, "This pill is called the Heaven Mending Pill. Not only can it be used to repair the Dantian, but it can also repair meridians." "Damn, the name is really arrogant." Sun Kong said with a smile, "If it can repair nascent souls, that's even better." Xiao Hua shrugged his shoulders and took another Heaven Mend pill. He replied, "This medicinal pill has been used by little brother before on gold core and foundation building disciples whose cultivations were crippled. I still don't know what kind of effect it has on nascent souls." "Really?" Not to mention Sun Kong, even Zhang Daoran asked with some surprise. Xiao Hua smiled and took out a few more jade bottles and handed them over. He said, "I'll give these two brothers some first. Thank you for your care on Yaoi Mountain." Hee hee. Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong laughed and caught it. They looked at each other and there seemed to be something else in their eyes. Xiao Hua, if you've consumed the medicinal pill, you should first find an abode to rest in. Once your injuries are slightly better, I'll ask the two seniors to send you back to Black Cloud Ridge. Fairy Jing had been holding Xiao Hua back. Her previous anxiousness was a temporary measure, but now that there were two male cultivators, Fairy Jing could no longer act as a temporary measure. Now that Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong already knew that Xiao Hua's injuries were fake, they naturally wouldn't expose it. They hurriedly waved their hands and said, "We still have matters to attend to. I'm afraid we can't send Xiao Hua back to Black Cloud Ridge. Fairy Jing, if you don't have any special matters, why don't you send Xiao Hua back? You're a nascent soul cultivator, so you should be able to protect Xiao Hua." Fairy Jing didn't expect the two of them to push the blame away, so she hesitated. Zhang Daoran thought a lot. He smiled and said, "Now that we have come out of the Yaotai assembly, we have escaped from the tiger's den, there is no need to be so anxious. As a matter of fact, the fellow Taoists who trained with us on the Yaotai mountain have all gathered here. Let's first discuss how to distribute the things we obtained on the Yaotai mountain. Brother Xiao also happens to be recuperating from his injuries." It won't be too late for Fairy Jing to make a decision when it's time to leave. All right. Fairy Jing nodded slightly. She looked to the left and pointed to a mountain peak in the distance, saying, "How about over there? Junior will take Xiaohua there first?" Sun Kong looked up. Although there was a lot of snow on the mountain peak, there was a large flat open space suitable for cultivators to rest. He nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Fairy Jing." Fairy Jing flew away with Xiaohua. Sun Kong took out the jade bottle, looked at it for a moment, and whispered a few words to Zhang Daoren. Soon after, over 100 cultivators flew over from all directions. They were the Taoist cultivators who had gone through life and death with them at the Yaotai assembly a year ago. Even if Kong Hongwu was still alive, he probably couldn't believe that the Yaotai assembly he had painstakingly created to provoke Taoist cultivators to kill each other and weaken the power of Taoist cultivators had now become an opportunity for Taoist cultivators to get closer and cultivate feelings. Although it hadn't happened before, from today onwards, more and more cultivators had tasted the sweetness and began to form groups at the Yaotai assembly. When these cultivators saw Zhang Daoren and Sun Kong, they were still as respectful as they were at the Yaotai assembly. After greeting them, they stood quietly on the left in an extremely orderly manner. However, while many cultivators were standing, they also looked into the distance as if they were checking Xiaohua's movements. After less than an hour, Zhang Daoren looked around and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, thank you for trusting me and fellow Taoist Sun Kong, and handing over all our gains in the Yaotai meeting. We can't let you down. Now, please come with us to discuss. We'll find a time and place, and we'll distribute our gains to you." Okay. The cultivators all smiled and said, "Seniors, you can come up with a plan. We believe in you." "That's not right." Sun Kong looked at the nearly 300 cultivators and said in confusion, "How come this old man doesn't remember there being so many people?" "Ah." Zhang Daoren flew up and said with a laugh, "Those who can come are naturally Taoist cultivators. This old man won't mind. Brother Sun Kong, you don't have to worry about it." "Okay." Sun Kong glanced at the crowd and said indifferently, "If you're sincere, this old man won't say anything. If you're half-hearted, don't blame this old man for being ruthless." After saying that, Sun Kong followed Zhang Daoren and flew to the mountain peak. Everyone was magnanimous and didn't care about Sun Kong's words. They followed the two to the mountain peak. Naturally, Xiaohua wouldn't immediately meditate. Instead, he stood there with a smile on his face. All the cultivators flew in front of him, then landed and bowed. Every one of them had a respectful expression on their faces. Xiaohua was very humble. After returning everyone's greetings, he said with a smile, "This Xiao has never been good at socializing. Previously, after leaving Yaotai Mountain, I wanted to leave first. However, Brother Dao Ran and Brother Sun Kong stopped this Xiao, saying that the idea of the trade fair was this Xiao's idea and that this Xiao must appear. This Xiao thought for a moment and didn't dare to agree. After all, this Xiao has his own matters to attend to. Moreover, these two brothers' characters and moral integrity are trustworthy. They definitely won't disappoint you. If this Xiao didn't go, it would be unnecessary." Zhang Daoren and Sun Kong glanced at each other and smiled bitterly. The two of them naturally wanted to invite Xiaohua to participate in the trade fair. However, they didn't expect that Xiaohua would refuse before they even opened their mouths. Apart from what Xiaohua said earlier, there must be some other misgivings. "Brother Xiao, you're wrong," Sun Kong hurriedly said. "Since this idea was yours, you have to take responsibility until the end. Even if you don't participate, you have to at least know how the trade is done, the time and place of the trade, and even the results of the trade, right?" "That's right. We hope that Taoist Master Xiao can also participate if you have the time." The cultivators looked at Xiaohua fervently. Xiaohua thought for a moment and nodded. "This Xiao has some injuries and needs to heal first. How about you two discuss it with your fellow Taoists first and inform this Xiao when there's a result?" "Good." Exalted Master Sun Kong signaled Zhang Daoren with his eyes again, and he led the group of cultivators to discuss the matters of the trade. Zhang Daoren brought Xiaohua and Fairy Jing to a secluded place. Zhang Daoren didn't avoid Fairy Jing and said with a smile, "Brother Xiao, do you know how to refine pills?" They do. Xiao Hua nodded. Zhang Daren's face revealed a happy expression and probed, was the heaven-mending pill refined by Brother Xiao? Xiao Hua said concisely, putting Zhang Daren's heart at ease. Good, good, good. Zhang Daren said 3 times in a row and rubbed his hands. There are many fellow Taoists in the hidden immortal continent who can refine pills. Even this old man can only refine ordinary pills. As far as this old man knows, there isn't a single cultivator who can refine an immortal pill like the heaven-mending pill. Xiao Hua smiled. He naturally understood what Zhang Daoren said. The cultivators of the hidden immortal continent had to rely on themselves to cultivate, whether it was refining pills or refining tools. However, because of limited energy, limited spiritual herbs, and limited materials, those who could truly become masters were naturally very few. Moreover, once they cultivated to foundation establishment, they had to prepare spiritual herbs for the dry separation pill and familiarize themselves with the refining method. Once they cultivated to Jindan, they had to worry about the nascent pregnancy pill. How could they be distracted by other pills? Even if there were some rogue cultivators who didn't establish a country and wanted to make a living by refining pills and refining tools, it would be impossible for them to cultivate to the point of perfection by themselves, right? Brother Daoren, if you have any errands, just say the word. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Zhang Daoren waved his hand. Let's talk about it in detail later. It's not appropriate to say it now. Good. If Brother Daoren has something to do, this Xiao will definitely do his best. Xiao Hua agreed. Moreover, after thinking for a moment, he waved his hand and took out a small qiankuan pouch. He handed it to Zhang Daoren and said, the pills inside are for Brother Daoren and Brother Sun Kong. You can distribute them as you see fit. Zhang Daoren took the small qiankuan pouch and scanned it with his divine sense. He opened his mouth slightly and his face was full of surprise. Xiao Hua was already used to Zhang Daren's surprise. Without waiting for Zhang Daren to speak, he handed over a rejuvenation pill and a heaven-mending pill to Fairy Jing. He said, Fairy Jing, this Xiao has a few pills for female cultivators. They aren't considered precious, please kindly accept them. Fairy Jing pursed her lips and smiled. Generally speaking, women didn't care whether the things given by others were precious or not. What they cared about was whether others gave them things. Xiao Hua didn't say what kind of pills he gave Fairy Jing. Fairy Jing's heart was immediately filled with sweetness. Fairy Jing reached out to take them and carefully put them away in the qiankuan pouch. She lowered her head and said, Many thanks, fellow Taoist Xiao. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes. Just take it as my thanks for escorting Fairy Jing. Chapter 3667. Hee, if you want me to be your bodyguard, I'm afraid these pills won't be enough. Fairy Jing replied with a chuckle. Since Xiao Hua wanted to cast a long line to catch a big fish, he naturally had to act well. Fairy Jing was a necessary person. Seeing Fairy Jing agree, Xiao Hua laughed and clapped his hands. Fairy Jing, you can name your price. If I have anything, I'll give it to you. Fairy Jing was overjoyed and acted like a spoiled child. Her eyes rippled with a smile. I've been thinking day and night about entering the leaving body realm. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao can help me? No problem. Xiao Hua agreed without hesitation. Seeing Xiao Hua's seriousness, Fairy Jing hurriedly waved her hand. Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm just joking with you. No need to take it seriously. I'll be happy if fellow Taoist can give me some pointers on cultivation. I'm not joking. Xiao Hua said seriously. Then he even looked at Zhang Daoren, who was smiling beside him. Brother Daoren, we all have to face the out-of-body stage. Isn't it better to comprehend it together than to work behind closed doors? Well said, Brother Xiao. Zhang Daoren hurriedly gave a thumbs up and praised. When Brother said you weren't going to participate in the trade fair, I was worried that Brother had some misgivings and that we had some bad intentions. Now, it seems that's not the case. Since that's the case, Brother Xiao, this old man will discuss something with you. Then, Zhang Daoren transmitted a few words to Xiao Hua. The general idea was that he wanted to unite his forces with Sun Kong's and Xiao Hua's forces to develop together. Moreover, there was a faint hint of entrusting. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and nodded. This matter is of great importance. I'm afraid it's not something that can be explained in a few words. After the trade fair, I'll have someone discuss it with Brother Darren's subordinates. The three of us will have a good idea. Good, it's a deal. Zhang Darren's heart was set. He smiled at Fairy Jing. I'll have to trouble Fairy Jing to protect Taoist Xiao. I'll go over there and take a look. Senior Darren, please. Fairy Jing respectfully bowed and sent Zhang Darren away. Seeing Zhang Darren leave, Xiao Hua sat cross-legged on the snow with his 5 hearts facing the sky. His mind entered his body to investigate. When Fairy Jing saw Xiao Hua circulating his energy, she didn't dare to come over and disturb him. She only slightly released her divine sense to guard the surroundings. Kong Hongwu is truly insidious and cunning. The green-robed Xiao Hua was now in control of his nascent soul. He spat out golden light from his mouth, spreading the medicinal power of the heavenly mending pill and repairing his damaged dantian bit by bit. When he saw the jade archive Xiao Hua enter, he gnashed his teeth and said, "Your methods are also vicious. Our corporeal bodies have been tempered, and our meridians are incomparable to those of ordinary cultivators. That so-called nascent soul annihilation art can penetrate the corporeal body and directly attack the dantian, and even destroy the nascent soul. If I hadn't gone out with my nascent soul, I'm afraid I would have been killed by him. Once bitten, twice shy." Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed slightly. "This time, we suffered a great loss, but the harvest is not small. In the end, nearly 100 nascent souls of the demon purification pot were taken away by the fiend Saber. I'm afraid he won't be able to take away many of them." Upon hearing the harvest, the green-robed Xiao Hua was immensely proud of himself. He smiled and said, "Right now, you and I have a lot of empty nascent souls. I want to wear one. Look at one and throw another one to the side." Empty nascent souls? Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned. "Aren't the nascent souls that we seized from the whirlpool in the demon refining gourd all intact?" The green-robed Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "The nascent souls are all intact, but a lot of them have already been destroyed. The huge whirlpool outside the demon refining gourd is used to destroy the nascent souls and nascent souls. The longer they stay inside, the thinner their nascent souls will be. If I didn't have the Kunlun mirror and the spiritual fire, I would have already been powerless to protect myself. How could I save Taoist Jingting?" "Oh, this is troublesome." Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned. "I still wanted to save these nascent soul cultivators and let them cultivate scattered nascent souls. The Immortal Palace is also strange. Why do they have so many nascent souls?" The green-robed Xiao Hua was quite puzzled. Jade Archive Xiao Hua shrugged. "I'm afraid you'll have to ask that immortal envoy and Kong Hongwu. Unfortunately, Kong Hongwu was killed by the demonic saber, and even his nascent soul didn't escape. There's simply no way to interrogate him." "Right, Do Shanjun's spiritual sense control ink cloud pupil has a secret technique to control nascent souls using spiritual sense." The green-robed Xiao Hua suggested again. "Although this secret technique is really sinister, it's suitable for these nascent souls whose nascent souls have yet to reach perfection. It's better than letting their nascent souls dissipate in a muddle, right? Moreover, fellow Taoist is proficient in nascent soul branding and nascent soul splitting techniques. In addition, your spiritual sense has been tempered to such a terrifying level in the Rockfall Matrix. This nascent soul is simply tailor-made for fellow Taoist." "That's not all." A voice faintly resounded in the void like heavenly thunder. Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his head in surprise. "Soul Cultivator fellow Taoist has also made progress?" "That's right, fellow Taoist, please come in for a chat." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure flashed and disappeared into the mysterious dark clouds. After a moment, he returned to his dantian with a smile. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua had already comprehended several soul cultivation techniques. Among them, there was a technique to repair the nascent soul, or rather, a beginner technique to repair the soul. Isn't this what Xiaohua needs the most right now? Great! Green-robed Xiaohua urged his invisible nascent soul to clap his hands and laugh. It's really like someone giving you a pillow when you're sleepy. Now that everything is ready, I don't even need the east wind anymore. Indeed. Xiaohua nodded. However, I seized 12 nascent souls from the swirl in the demon purification pot, and 11 were seized by fellow Taoist in green robe. Including the 117 nascent souls that fellow Taoist in green robe sent into the lost realm of Kunlun when he was refining the Kunlun mirror in the swirl, we have over 140 nascent souls that are still missing. It will take a lot of time and energy to repair the nascent souls of these nascent souls without using the secret technique of telepathic thoughts. Don't be a hypocrite. The green-robed Xiaohua sneered. Who knows what kind of character these nascent soul cultivators have? If you don't use your secret technique, how are you going to control them? Don't be a snake-warming farmer. And I will naturally consider this. Xiaohua smiled. You don't have to worry, fellow Taoist green robe. That's good. The green-robed Xiaohua didn't speak anymore. In fact, after this Yaotai meeting, it's obvious where our shortcomings are. Jade Archive Xiaohua said, I need a more powerful spiritual weapon, or even a spiritual treasure. The green-robed Xiaohua curled his lips. He knew that his problem had come, so he only responded lazily. The soul-punishing vital light needs to be refined again. The previous 2 nascent soul sword spirits were already difficult to kill a 5th-stage essence chi cultivator. Moreover, the previous soul-punishing vital light mainly had a yin-type sword spirit, which was too soft. Many cultivators' defensive magic treasures couldn't be pierced through. This time, I obtained Taoist Huda's fire gourd. I can refine it into the soul-punishing vital light. There's also that spatial monster's thigh. The green-robed Xiaohua saw that he couldn't refuse, so he blinked his eyes and said, the tip of that thigh can pierce through the void. It's very sharp. There's no harm in refining it into the soul-punishing vital light. You only need to use the tip. Xiaohua knew that the green-robed Xiaohua's words were very reasonable. He thought for a moment and said, I feel that there are other uses for other places. Good. The green-robed Xiaohua clapped his hands. Just this little bit is enough. There's also the soaring dragon shears. Xiaohua said again. Previously, I felt that this thing was only half a piece, so I didn't want to refine it. I wanted to wait until I gathered all the pieces. Unfortunately, even the last piece of the Kunlun mirror has been found, but this thing has no clues at all. Taoist green-robed, please refine it while you're at it. While I'm at it. The green-robed Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Does Taoist know how difficult it was for I to refine the Kunlun mirror? To tell the truth, if it wasn't a matter of life and death, I wouldn't have been able to refine it easily. Xiaohua of course instantly said, that's why Taoist is several times more powerful than I. I can only trouble Taoist for this matter. I heard Confucian Taoist drop a book bag, saying something about a hands-off shopkeeper. Taoist, isn't he talking about you? The green-robed Xiaohua said somewhat eccentrically. Confucian Taoist Xiaohua's voice uncontrollably sounded above his head. He then hurriedly explained, Taoist, this isn't what I said, it's what the green-robed Xiaohua said himself. No matter. Fellow Taoists are all improving, I am also very happy. Xiaohua said with a smile. He then handed over the sword gourd, fire gourd, and soaring dragon shears to the green-robed Xiaohua, waiting for him to refine it after he repaired his dantian. Give it to me. The green-robed Xiaohua stretched out his hand. Without Taoist's blood essence, I can't refine it. Sigh. Xiaohua sighed and waved his hand. Taoist should first repair your dantian, and slowly nourish the 2 magic treasures. It's really not easy for I to take out my blood essence now. Let's wait a bit. That bastard Mo Ling has seriously injured us. The green-robed Xiaohua was silent. After a while, he advised in a low voice, Taoist, Mo Ling is an outsider after all, you can't trust him. That demonic technique is also a technique of the demonic realm. You and I are humans, it's fine if we don't cultivate it. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Maybe before, but now I have been forced to do something beyond my ability. If I don't cultivate the demonic technique, I can't control the demonic saber. If I don't control the demonic saber, I'll always be in danger of being controlled by the demonic saber. Taoist, what do you think we should do? This demonic saber is also strange. That demonic dragon has clearly been swallowed into a demonic spirit. How can it still be so arrogant? Confucian Taoist Xiao Hua gritted his teeth. Even I can't completely restrain it. Since it's a maggot in the bone, we can only slowly think of a way. Xiao Hua said. Although this demonic saber is really powerful and can kill a 5th grade elemental energy great grandmaster like it's a toy, the backlash is too strong. Fellow Taoists, don't you all feel that everyone is a bit affected? Saint Tseng once said, I reflect on myself 3 times a day. Am I not loyal to others? Make friends but don't trust them? Pass it down and don't learn it? Xiao Hua's face turned cold. He asked, Confucian Taoist, have you never read it? Why don't you reflect on yourself? Why don't you understand yourself and create a grudge against Taoist Xiao Hua? This is Jade Archive. Xiao Hua frowned slightly, looking at the 5 strange imperial equipment that rushed out of the jade box. His heart was indescribably strange. Kong Hongwu is the palace lord of Star Lord Palace, and he himself is a Confucian cultivator. Why did he seal these 5 imperial equipment with Tao talismans? While thinking, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and one of the imperial equipment that was faintly connected flew out and landed in his hand. This was a fist-sized ochre imperial equipment, and when it landed in his hand, it gave off a warm feeling. Moreover, this imperial equipment's texture was very solid, and it was engraved with mountains and rivers, flowers, birds, fish, insects, and other things, giving off an indescribable feeling of heaviness. Looking at the Jade Archive, Xiao Hua didn't know what to do, so he took out another one. After a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at the 5 imperial equipment. These 5 imperial equipment were obviously a set. It was just that the shapes were different, and the shapes were also strange. Some were like worms, some were like eagles, and some were like bears, and so on. These 5 imperial equipment. I'm afraid they're not simple. Jade Archive Xiao Hua sneered. The Star Lords of Star Lord Palace are all criminals of the Immortal Palace, and Kong Hongwu himself probably isn't that strong. He racked his brains to collect these imperial equipment to curry favor with the people of the Immortal Palace, and perhaps it's that so-called immortal emissary. No matter who he wants to show filial piety to, these things have fallen into Ai's hands, and I'm afraid they'll never see the light of day again. Immediately, Jade Archive Xiao Hua threw these imperial equipment back into the jade box, casually throwing them into the pile of imperial equipment and magic treasures, and then his figure swayed, entering the inside of the space. After a long time, Xiao Hua opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was Fairy Jing's concerned gaze. Although Fairy Jing wasn't close to Xiao Hua, her eyes were overflowing with emotions as she watched Xiao Hua's movements without blinking, fearing that Xiao Hua would have any abnormalities. When Xiao Hua suddenly opened his eyes, Fairy Jing was rather surprised. She didn't have time to move her eyes away, and their eyes met. Seeing the concern in Fairy Jing's eyes, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, and he had an impulse to tell her the reason for this matter, or simply let her go back, and he would leave alone to see what Taoist Yuan Qing was plotting. But after thinking about it for a moment, he realized that aside from Fairy Jing, he really couldn't find a suitable cultivator to follow him. If he left, there would be a huge flaw. So, Xiao Hua stood up and smiled at Fairy Jing, who was hastily avoiding his gaze, and said, Fairy Jing, I have something to tell you. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please speak. Fairy Jing was clearly somewhat absent-minded. If one day you discover that this Xiao is deceiving you about something, please don't blame this Xiao. This Xiao has his own difficulties. In fact, these words were quite obvious. If it was under normal circumstances, with Fairy Jing's pure heart, she would definitely be able to hear it. Unfortunately, this woman was currently a part of the situation, so how could she distinguish it? She hesitated for a moment, and then a trace of sadness appeared between her brows, as if she was thinking of something else. Xiao Hua's heart thumped. Just as he was about to explain, he heard Zhang Daren's loud laughter again. "Brother Xiao, I didn't disturb you, did I? If you've already rested, please come over like this. We've already arranged everything. Fairy Jing, don't think too much." Xiao Hua could only comfort her like this, and urged his figure to fly over. Of course, flying techniques were the most ordinary, and his speed was also extremely slow. "Fellow Taoist Xiao has already recovered?" Master Sun Kong blinked his eyes at Xiao Hua and said loudly. Xiao Hua smiled slightly. He naturally knew that Master Sun Kong, in order to cater to his plan, had promoted him quite a bit. Presumably, his heroic deeds in the Rockfall Matrix had also been exaggerated by him. Sure enough, when Master Sun Kong accompanied Xiao Hua in front of everyone, all the cultivators respectfully bowed and said in unison, "Greetings, Taoist Xiao." "Fellow Taoists." Xiao Hua hurriedly returned the greeting, and with a wave of his hand, everyone felt a flash of Xiao Hua's profound magic power, and the respect in their eyes became even more intense. "Brother Xiao, this is the constitution that we've discussed. If you have time, take a look." Zhang Daoren took out a jade eye from his bosom and handed it over to Xiao Hua. "The time is set to be 3 years later. Moreover, all the things that we've obtained in the Jade Pavilion conference this time, except for the 2 treasures, will be recorded in it to show fairness." "Good." Xiao Hua nodded. "We Dao sect cultivators don't have a good reputation in the hidden immortal continent. First, it's because Confucian cultivators exaggerate, and second, it's because our Dao sect's cultivation method is different from Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sections. We have a great need for spirit pills, spirit herbs, and cultivation methods. Sometimes, we have no choice but to do some things that corrupt our conscience. These things are admittedly done secretly, but there will always be a time when it's exposed. There's an old saying, the heavens are watching what people do. This Xiao doesn't dare to ask you fellow Taoists for anything. I only ask you fellow Taoists to think about your own conscience when you do things, and think about the heavens above your head. Brother Daoran and Brother Sun Kong have done extremely well. The word fairness is easy to say, but it's difficult to do. The 2 fellow Taoists actually put this word in front of your head. Presumably, all of you fellow Taoists are convinced in your heart. Leaving the treasures you've obtained with other fellow Taoists is also a relief. If this Xiao has the opportunity 3 years later, I'll definitely go and participate in the conference at that time. Once Xiao Hua's words came out, the several hundred cultivators had different expressions on their faces. Some looked pensive, some looked disapproving, and even some looked disdainful. Xiao Huan naturally didn't feel that his words could change everything. He already felt pretty good that he was able to seize this opportunity to speak his mind. Immediately after, Xiao Hua waved his hand again, and several hundred jade eyes fell down like rain. 1 or 2 fell in front of each cultivator's eyes. The crowd of cultivators looked at the jade eyes with puzzlement. They didn't know whether they should take it or not. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, this Xiao has a matter to ask of you. Inside these jade eyes are low-level mental cultivation methods from Foundation Establishment to Enlightened Realm. There are also some mental cultivation methods that are different from the current cultivation methods. This Xiao hopes that you fellow Taoists can take these jade eyes back, or pass them on to your own disciples, or gift them to the later generations of Taoist disciples. Of course, if you fellow Taoists can copy them and gift them to Confucian disciples with potential, this Xiao will be even more grateful." "Haha, that's easy." When Master Sun Kong heard this, he flicked his big sleeve and took the jade eyes in front of him. He said with a smile, "This old man will let the disciples make 10,000 copies and pass them on to other low-level disciples." "Hehe, I also have no problem." When the crowd of cultivators heard this, they naturally agreed without hesitation. It was just helping Xiao Hua distribute the cultivation methods. It was simply a matter of lifting their hands. Chapter 3669. Then, Xiao Hua told them about his suspicions that Confucian cultivators had tampered with the Taoist techniques. Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong had cultivated for thousands of years and had encountered far more things than Xiaohua, so how could they not feel anything? However, they had always been minding their own business. They were already very happy that they had obtained the correct techniques, so how could they care about others? Now that Xiaohua mentioned it, he even took out a lot of cultivation methods to ask them to teach their disciples. Of course, they all agreed. Finally, before the two left, Xiaohua specially asked them to help him find children with good aptitudes, and there was no limit to the number, the more the better. Sun Kong and Zhang Daoran knew that Xiaohua wanted to teach disciples, so they wanted to remind him, but when they thought about how high Xiaohua's cultivation was, how could he not know the pros and cons? They didn't mention it and cupped their hands to bid farewell to Xiaohua. Fairy Jing naturally stayed by Xiaohua's side. She looked at Xiaohua's actions with a dumbfounded expression. These were things she had never thought about before. In her heart, as long as she could cultivate to nascent soul, then late nascent soul, it would be her life's greatest goal. She didn't dare to hope for out-of-body cultivators, so her agreement with Xiaohua was just a joke. After everyone had left, Fairy Jing said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, what are you doing all this for? Are you trying to revitalize the Taoist sect? Are you trying to develop your own power? Is it because your power isn't enough, so you don't want to become sworn brothers with Sun Kong and Zhang Daoran?" Speaking of sworn brothers, Fairy Jing couldn't help but think of Xiaohua's famous words, and her face flushed. If you're talking about revitalizing the Taoist sect, this Xiao's power isn't enough. Xiaohua said with a smile, then just think of it as developing my own power. Although this Xiao's cultivation is good, I don't have many disciples under me, and many of them are good and bad. So it's like that? Fairy Jing nodded, but she understood that just developing her own power didn't need to be so troublesome. This is a great man. Fairy Jing couldn't help but praise in her heart. Xiaohua didn't know that he was so great in Fairy Jing's heart. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go, this Xiao still has some things to do. You have to escort this Xiao." "Of course." Fairy Jing smiled and was abnormally quiet. "Oh, actually," Xiaohua thought for a moment and finally said, "I didn't suffer such heavy injuries." "Nonsense." Fairy Jing said angrily, "I'm the only one who knows about your injuries. Your nascent soul is damaged, and your dantian is damaged. Why don't you release your nascent soul for me to see?" Xiaohua sweated. Even if his nascent soul was in perfect condition, it still couldn't be seen by others. He raised his hand, wanting to cast a spell, but right now he didn't have any magic power in his body, so he could only cast Confucian cultivation techniques. Forget it, this Xiao's nascent soul isn't wearing any treasured armor. Xiaohua shrugged helplessly. "Cheeky." The corner of Fairy Jing's mouth curled up as she spat again. Her expression was one of joy. After flying with Xiaohua for a while, Fairy Jing was somewhat bewildered and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you want to go to the front of Yaota Mountain?" "Yeah," Xiaohua said with a smile. "This Xiao still has 2 new disciples there, and this Xiao still has some trivial matters to attend to." Fairy Jing advised, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this time's Yaota Mountain gathering was really strange. I feel that, besides the strange treasure that Kong Hongwu mentioned, there must be something else that we don't know about." This year, those who can come down from Jade Mountain are all elites of the hidden Immortal Continent's Taoist sections. Although this one heard a lot of alarmist news, this one firmly believes that Taoist Xiao can return safely. You're welcome," Xiaohua said with a smile. This one was just lucky to escape death. Fellow Taoist must have noticed that this one is already injured. Therefore, this one is far from being the elite that fellow Taoist thinks. Ingpa waved his hand. This one doesn't care if you are an elite of the Taoist sects or not. What this one cares about is Taoist Zhao's trustworthiness. Then he took out 2 Qingkuan bags from his waist. The 2 demons behind him also hurriedly took out 4 Qingkuan bags and handed them to Xiaohua together. Ingpa didn't do anything special. The 2 demons behind him slightly flew forward a few steps and sandwiched Xiaohua in the middle, as if they were afraid that Xiaohua would escape. Seeing this, Ingpa said with a bitter smile, "Taoist Xiao, please don't blame them. This one's clansmen have suffered too many losses in front of the human race. There are too many tricks that they can't think of. Even if this one took out Taoist Zhao's vitality stones, the clansmen wouldn't dare to believe it too much. And this old man can understand. Xiao Hua nodded and didn't think it was strange. He waved his hand and took out several small Qingquan bags and handed them to Ying Pe and the two demons, saying, "You guys take the vitality stones first. This one will look at the things inside." Ying Pe didn't take the small Qingquan bags, but said a few strange words indifferently. The two demons hurriedly took the small Qingquan bags and looked at each other, then flew back behind Ying Pe. "Okay, this time, thank you, fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua took out a jade-eye bag and handed it to Ying Pe, saying, "Next time, if fellow Taoist has something, you can send it to the place recorded on the jade-eye bag. This one's imprint is inside, it's also recorded who you give it to. They will pay fellow Taoist enough vitality stones." Chapter 3670. Seeing Xiao Hua like this, Ying Pe was stunned and said in a low voice, "Taoist master, you don't want to take a look at the things inside?" "No need," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "To be honest, the things I need are all rare and strange. Taoist friend might not have the things inside. However, if I only want my own things, then wouldn't you be wasting your time on the other things? Rather than letting Taoist friend run around for nothing, I might as well take them all." Hearing this, Ying Pe was silent for a moment and stretched out his hand. Those were obviously demon claws covered in light brown fur. Xiao Hua smiled and stretched out his hand to shake Ying Pe's hand. The brown fur on Ying Pe's hand was very sharp and prickly. However, Xiao Hua looked straight at Ying Pe's face that was hidden in the armor and didn't care at all. "Taoist friend is the first trustworthy person I met in the hidden immortal continent." Ying Pe looked into Xiao Hua's eyes and said in a low voice, "If the first transaction was for profit, then the future transactions with Taoist master will also be for profit." Xiao Hua originally thought that Ying Pe's second sentence would have a twist, but who knew that Ying Pe would be so straightforward? Xiao Hua couldn't help but laugh. "Taoist master, please don't laugh. For the survival of my clan, profit is the most important thing. Of course, other than profit, I will do my best, and even use the power of my entire clan, to serve Taoist master Xiao." Ying Pe said immediately. After speaking, Ying Pe let go of his hand and Xiao Hua also withdrew his hand with a smile. Xiao Hua naturally didn't think that what Ying Pe said was the same as what Ao Zhantian and the others said, so he said with a smile, "To be able to obtain Taoist friend's trust, I am also honored. However, I don't know if the primeval stones I took out are enough. If not, how much more do you need? I will make up for it." Ying Pe asked the two demons several times in a low voice and then said with a smile, "Taoist master has more than enough. My clan is very satisfied. If Taoist doesn't have anything else, I will take my leave. I will find the things and send them to the place Taoist master wants." After sending Ying Pe off, Fairy Jing brought Chang Yu and Wu Tianfei over and said with a smile, "Taoist master Xiao has friends all over the world. Even the demons of the 1,000 demon sacred realm are old acquaintances." "Not at all, not at all." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "It's just that we met during the negotiation. Fellow Taoist Xiao, the items in the 1,000 demons sacred realm are indeed suitable for Taoist cultivators, but most of them are harmful to the physical body." Fairy Jing reminded him with concern. "Fellow Taoist, you must be extremely careful when using them." "Yes, thank you for your reminder." Xiao Hua naturally knew that Fairy Jing had good intentions and agreed with a smile. Fairy Jing then asked, "Also, fellow Xiao, where are you going instead of returning to the Black Wind Ridge to cultivate?" Fairy, don't be anxious. Come with me to watch a good show, and then I'll tell you." Xiao Hua giggled. He waved his hand and brought Fairy Jing, Chang Yu, and the others to where the alliance was. Not to mention Fairy Jing, even Chang Yu and Wu Tian were confused. They didn't know what Xiao Hua meant. However, when they saw Xue Ping hurriedly flying out of the barracks before Xiao Hua landed, Chang Yu and Wu Tian thought of something. "Senior." Xue Ping's face was filled with ecstasy. He bowed and greeted, "Junior congratulates Senior on leaving the Jadestage gathering unscathed." Xiao Hua didn't stop and landed in the largest tent in the alliance. He said as he flew, "Is your monarch still here?" Shui Ping hurriedly followed. Although he didn't know why Xiao Hua was moving forward in such a hurry, he didn't dare to ask. He smiled and said, "My monarch is a benevolent monarch. He emphasizes finishing what he started. He definitely won't leave the Jadestage gathering early." Although there was news before noon that not many cultivators could leave the Jadestage gathering, my monarch still waited here and prepared to be the last to leave. Good. Xiao Hua looked at the tent that was getting closer and closer. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Did you mention me to Xiao Jun?" Shui Ping shrunk his neck and said in a low voice, "Junior didn't dare to forget Senior's instructions. Junior didn't mention it. I hope Senior can give my monarch a surprise." "Haha, of course, I'll definitely give Xiao Jun a surprise." Xiao Hua laughed loudly. His laughter actually had a different meaning. Shui Ping was stunned and looked at Xiao Hua in surprise. After all, from Xiao Hua's tone, he seemed to be familiar with Xiao Jun. Then, seeing that Xiao Hua was already dozens of feet away from the tent, Shui Ping hurriedly reminded him, "Say, Senior, my monarch's tent is right in front. Please wait for a moment. Allow Junior to inform him." Shui Ping's forehead was already sweating when he said this, and he was stuttering a little. He already felt that something was amiss. When he thought about it carefully, he immediately realized that there was something strange about it. "There's no need to inform him," Xiao Hua said coldly. Shui Ping's heart clenched and he opened his mouth. But, yes, although Xiao Hua was a nascent soul senior and looked down on Xiao Jun, this was the military camp of the Chanyang Kingdom after all. This tent was the golden tent of the monarch of the Chanyang Kingdom. Xiao Hua clearly didn't care about Xiao Jun and the Chanyang Kingdom by barging in so openly. "Who dares to barge into my monarch's golden tent?" As he spoke, several cultivators dressed in different clothes flew out from the left side of the tent. The cultivator at the front, who was at the 3rd grade of Essence Force, shouted coldly, "What?" He looked at Xiao Jun and coldly said, "You want to fight with this old man?" Without waiting for Xiao Jun to reply, Xiao Hua took a step forward. An invisible force pushed the general, who was at least a grade 2 origin energy, to the side. That general clenched his teeth and raised the treasured saber in his hand. Before he could do anything, Xiao Hua coldly snorted. That general immediately flew away from Xiao Hua's eyes. With a pew sound, he crashed into the side of the golden tent and fell to the ground. "Protect the emperor! Protect the emperor!" A Buddhist cultivator in front of Xiao Jun shouted as he prepared to take out his Buddhist weapon. "Stop!" Xiao Jun shouted. His face was calm as he said, "This is my private matter. It has nothing to do with you. Don't worry, monarch. Even if this cultivator..." How could the Buddhist sect cultivators give up? But before they could say anything, Fairy Jing let out a cold snort and released the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. The Buddhist sect cultivators were all submerged by this pressure and found it difficult to even open their mouths. Fortunately, Fairy Jing only revealed a bit of her power and immediately withdrew her pressure. The cultivators in the tent were all shocked. That's right, a nascent soul cultivator who came out of the Jade Pavilion conference should have just experienced a life and death situation. How could these people compare to her? "This servant came to you to discuss it, but you said that this was a matter between men, and you didn't want this servant to get involved. After that, this servant chased Xiao Jian off the throne and wanted to imprison him. You said that this was a matter of the country, and you didn't want this servant to get involved. Not only did you let Xiao Jian go, you even sent experts to protect him. Look, what did your kindness get in return? It was Xiao Jian's revenge. Xiao Jian repaid kindness with enmity. This monarch can't ask about other people's matters. This monarch only wants to have a clear conscience." Xiao Jun reached out to hold Gigi's hand and said warmly, "Moreover, Xiao Jian is this monarch's brother and your husband. This monarch can't let you and I carry infamy. Since today's grudge has come to an end, you don't need to think about other things. All of this was done by this monarch, and it has nothing to do with you. Finished speaking, Xiao Jun looked at Xiao Hua and said, Senior Xiao, you and I have the same surname. This junior doesn't dare to climb up to the same sect. I ask Senior to be lenient and just take this junior's life. Gigi is Xiao Jian's original wife, and I presume that he didn't ask Senior to take Shiji's life, right? Xiao Jian didn't mention this. Xiao Hua lightly nodded. In the heavens we are willing to be lovebirds, and on earth we are willing to be intertwined branches. Even if this servant dies, this servant wants to be a mandarin duck with the same name as my husband. Gigi said affectionately, in this life, this servant will only recognize Xiao Jun as my husband. Xiao Jian is nothing more than a treacherous rascal. Facing these two people who were unafraid of death, Xiao Hua was a bit embarrassed. He knew of Xiao Jian's selfishness and his addiction to gambling. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Jian, Xiao Jun, and Gigi had such a deep relationship. Moreover, Xiao Jian's position of monarch was taken away by Xiao Jun, but this position was originally passed down by Gigi's father. If Gigi took it away, it could be considered as returning it to its rightful owner. Especially if it was as Gigi said, Xiao Jian wasn't a qualified monarch, and Xiao Jun was the wise monarch that Xue Ping spoke of. How could Xiao Hua give the position of monarch to Xiao Jian? Daoist Xiao. At this moment, the others didn't dare to speak. Fairy Jing, who was behind him, opened her mouth and said, this servant can't discern the words of others, but this woman's words, this servant can tell that they come from the bottom of her heart. Has Daoist Xiao been bewitched by others? This servant hopes that Daoist Xiao can be a bit more lenient and carefully investigate before speaking again. Xiao Hua nodded and said, it seems that this matter is far from as simple as this Xiao thought. This Xiao might even be wrong. All of you can leave. Fairy Jing said indifferently, if Daoist Xiao wants to make a move, it's useless for all of you to stay here. All of you can leave. Xiao Jun waved his hand and said, Senior Xiao is here for a family matter. It has nothing to do with all of you. However, the soldiers and cultivators were still somewhat unwilling. Quickly leave. Gigi said coldly, this old woman is going to talk about some family scandals. Do you all want to listen? Yes. Gigi's words were still the most effective. Everyone hurriedly bowed and quietly retreated to the sides. Looking at the peaceful tent, Xiao Jun pulled Gigi's hand and walked down from the seat of honor. He bowed and said, Senior, please take a seat. Xiao Hua didn't hold back. He walked to the back of the jade table and sat down. He said to Chang Yu and Wu Tian, the two of you can leave. I'll talk to Xiao Jun. Yes, master. Chang Yu and Wu Tian hurriedly left the tent. Fairy Jing's beautiful eyes swept over and said with a smile, since it's your Xiao family's matter, it's not convenient for this servant to listen. I'll leave for a moment. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and nodded, very well. Fairy Jing, please wait outside for a moment. After Fairy Jing left, Xiao Hua looked at Xiao Jun's slightly calmed face and said, tell me the matter between you and Xiao Jian. No matter how big or small it is, tell me everything. Yes, senior. Seeing Xiao Hua's tone as a senior of the Xiao family didn't dare to be negligent and told the whole story in detail. The matter was far more complicated than Xiao Hua imagined. Xiao Jun and Xiao Jian were cousins. They were from the side branch of the Xiao family of the Single Liang country. The Xiao family had some influence in the Single Liang country and was a big family that the king of the Single Liang country wanted to rope in. Xiao Jun and Xiao Jian had a good relationship since childhood. Xiao Jian's character wasn't good and others didn't like him. However, Xiao Jun was magnanimous and didn't care about Xiao Jian's shortcomings. He could be considered one of the few family members that Xiao Jian could trust. When the two of them got older, they entered the academy of the Single Liang country to study. Although Xiao Jian's character wasn't good, he was exceptionally intelligent. His studies were outstanding and he also stood out in Taoism cultivation. On the other hand, Xiao Jun couldn't compare to Xiao Jian in any aspect. As the princess of the Single Liang country, Gigi also studied in the academy. Naturally, she was like the moon surrounded by stars. Xiao Jian even spent a lot of effort to get close to Gigi. Unfortunately, Gigi had unique insight and didn't pay much attention to Xiao Jian. Instead, she was especially close to Xiao Jun. Thus, Xiao Jian pretended to be drunk and confided in front of Xiao Jun that he wouldn't marry anyone other than Gigi. Xiao Jun fell for it and reluctantly dropped out of the academy. He was even punished by the Xiao family. Later, the king of the single Liang country selected a son-in-law from the Imperial Academy. Xiao Jian stood out and obtained the king's favor. Of course, when the king was alive, Xiao Jian pretended very well. He handled the affairs of the country and family cleanly without any mistakes. Although Gigi's heart wasn't with Xiao Jian, she didn't think too much about it for the sake of the single Liang country. However, when the king passed away, Xiao Jian took control of the country and immediately revealed his true nature. Not only did he begin to neglect the affairs of the country, he even learned cockfighting from an unknown disciple. For a time, cockfighting became the norm in the single Liang country and no one paid attention to the affairs of the country. Because of this, Gigi also paid a visit to the state preceptor of the single Liang country and begged him to step in. However, the state preceptor was at the juncture of cultivating his golden core. How could he care about the life and death of the single Liang country? He didn't pay attention to it at all. In the end, when Xiao Jian lost the 3 border cities to the neighboring country and wanted to gamble again, Gigi couldn't bear it anymore. She contacted Xiao Jun and found a Buddhist sect expert who was also looking for help in the hidden immortal continent. In one fell swoop, Xiao Jian was kicked off the throne. The Golden Core state preceptor was also expelled from the single Liang country by the Buddhist sect expert. From then on, Xiao Jun established the country with the Buddhist sect and sat on the throne of the single Liang country. Oh, if what you said is true. After listening to Xiao Jun's analysis, Xiao Hua said indifferently, "This old man was wrong." "Oh, right, Gigi, what happened to your face?" Gigi wasn't surprised. Chapter 3672. Speaking of this, Gigi rejoiced again. "It is also because of this disease that Xiao Jian has never touched me since we got married. I have always let the maidservants by my side accompany me. Only then can I keep Xiao Jun's chastity." Xiao Hua was quite moved and looked at Xiao Jun. "Xiao Jun, you don't dislike Gigi's face. What Junior doesn't like is the disease on Gigi's face, not Gigi's face." Xiao Jun didn't dare to hide and said in a low voice, "Facing Gigi's heart, that kind of trust and affection is enough to drown this kind of dislike." Thinking back to those days in the bamboo pavilion after the rain, Gigi half closed her fan. This kind of memory is enough for Junior to be drunk for the rest of Junior's life. "You are telling the truth." Gigi slightly curled her lips. "Can't you say that you don't dislike it?" Xiao Jun smiled and didn't refute. Where was the majestic appearance of a monarch from before? Gigi said to Xiao Hua again, "Junior knows that men like beauty, so I have always used a handkerchief to cover it." Previously, Junior still had some doubts about Xiao Jun, but after so many years, he didn't find someone to serve him like Xiao Jian. What else can Junior say? Good. 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 Xiao Hua praised 3 times. What an affectionate and righteous monarch. Senior praises too much. Love fills one's stomach. Junior doesn't feel that there is anything special. Xiao Jun answered honestly again. Che. Although Xiao Hua didn't say anything, he was cursing in his heart. He secretly curled his lips and said, "Extinguishing the candle, isn't it the same? Of course you don't care too much. This old man is also someone who has experienced it." Then Xiao Hua stood up and said, "Xiao Jun, don't be too proud. This old man has heard your and Xiao Jian's words, but each of you has your own reasons, so this old man can't jump to conclusions. However, based on the affection between you and Gigi, this old man won't take your life. As for whether or not you should give up your throne, this old man will go to Dan Liang country to take a look. Remember, don't try to send any information to Dan Liang country, that will be even worse for you." Xiao Jun listened and said with a smile, "Senior, don't worry, Junior has a clear conscience, but I ask Senior to investigate openly and secretly." Good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and beckoned, "Gigi, come here, let this old man see your face." "Huh." Gigi's body trembled, and her voice trembled. Senior, do you have any ideas? I don't know. Xiao Hua lightly said, if you are willing, this old man can give it a try. Xiao Jun said anxiously from the side, if Senior has a way, Junior? Junior is willing to give up the throne. Why would I want your throne? Isn't it tiring enough? Xiao Hua waved his hand, stretched out his hand, and squeezed the purple lump on Gigi's face. Then, he put his finger in front of his nose and smelled it for a moment. After that, he frowned and said, this is the poison of the bamboo heart. It's caused by the birth of insects in the bamboo heart in a cold place. It's quite rare. Do you particularly like bamboo? Yes, my house in the Imperial Academy is all made of bamboo. Seeing Xiao Hua expose her in a single breath, Gigi couldn't help but tremble again. She hurriedly replied, moreover, that bamboo house doesn't see the sun all year round. When you go back, move away the thing blocking the bamboo house or burn the bamboo house. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said. Gigi smiled bitterly, that bamboo house has already been burned by Xiao Jian. Xiao Hua understood that this was Xiao Jian's action of being jealous of Xiao Jun and Gigi's relationship. He replied, this old man can cure this poison, plop. Xiao Jun no longer cared about his status as a monarch. He knelt in front of Xiao Hua and begged, Senior, please help. Half a day later, 4 figures flew out from the alliance of the Single Liang Kingdom and headed towards the direction of the Single Liang Kingdom. After flying for an hour, seeing that the snowflakes gradually stopped, Fairy Jing was puzzled and asked, fellow Taoist Xiao, since you have already treated Gigi's illness, and you think that Xiao Jun is a loyal and affectionate monarch, then why do you still have to make a trip to the Single Liang Kingdom? What I have heard and what I have seen are not important. Xiao Hua smiled and said, the most important thing is the choice of the people of the Single Liang Kingdom. Moreover, whether Xiao Jian's words are true or not, is too important to the Jiang country. Therefore, I have no choice but to make a trip to the Single Liang Kingdom. Of course, Fairy Jing didn't know what Xiao Hua was thinking. She didn't ask and only smiled, is this the reason why you didn't return to the Black Wind Ridge? Not all. Xiao Hua shook his head and said, I didn't return because someone else did. They are more suitable than me. Oh, them? Fairy Jing turned to look at Chang Yu and Wu Tian and asked curiously, just the 2 of them? How can they compare to a real person? Hee, of course it's not them. Xiao Hua smiled mysteriously and said, I have even better help. Fellow Taoist also knows how to keep people in suspense. Fairy Jing pursed her lips and smiled. Xiao Hua scanned with his divine sense and pointed to the distance and said, let's go. When we get there, I will ask my helper to come out and meet with Fairy Jing. Ask him to come out? Fairy Jing was even more bewildered. Fellow Taoist can't have brought out the fellow Taoist from the Jade Pavilion meeting in his Qinquan bag, right? That's right. Can't I? Xiao Hua laughed. When they landed on the foot of the mountain, Xiao Hua looked around and threw out a jade talisman. After setting up the capital star array, he made a grabbing motion with his hand. I still want to listen to Taoist Zhao's explanation. Oh, actually, I was also injured by the formation in the end. Xiao Hua smiled and said, in the end, I was still discovered by Fairy Jing and was brought out of Yaote Mountain by her. How is that possible? Su Tingzi couldn't believe it. Even with fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation, you were still heavily injured? Nothing's impossible. Xiao Hua said indifferently. This time, less than 20% of the Golden Core cultivators and less than 40% of the nascent soul cultivators were able to come down from Yaotai Mountain. It's normal for me to be injured. So many Taoist disciples died. Su Tingzi was flabbergasted, but he also felt lucky in his heart. Fairy Jing nodded. What fellow Taoist Xiao said is true. I followed Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong and killed several large formations. If fellow Taoist Su Tingzi wants to listen, I can tell you one by one. Okay, I'm all ears. Su Tingzi obviously wanted to listen. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hua smiled and said, don't be anxious. If you want to listen, let's listen together. There are more people? Su Tingzi and Fairy Jing were stunned. Xiao Hua smiled mysteriously and shook out two late-stage nascent soul cultivators, Xue Mingzi and Ao Zhantian, from the mountain and river seal. Then, dozens of golden core cultivators fell out like dumplings. Su Tingzi and Fairy Jing were dumbfounded. Although the two of them were both early-stage and mid-stage nascent soul cultivators and weren't very famous, Xue Mingzi and Ao Zhantian were late-stage nascent soul cultivators comparable to Taoist Huoda. The two of them could recognize them at a glance. They never thought that the two of them would come out of Xiao Hua's mountain and river seal. Chapter 3673. Xue Mingzi and Ao Zhantian were stunned at first, but they soon understood. They looked at each other and greeted Xiao Hua. Su Tingzi and Fairy Jing also hurried over. After the dozens of golden core cultivators greeted them, they also walked over to Chang Yu and Wu Tian and greeted each other again. Don't be anxious, don't be anxious. Xiao Hua smiled again after the situation calmed down. There are still some fellow Taoists who haven't arrived yet. Puff, puff, puff. The mountain river seal trembled again, one after another. Fairy Jing was flabbergasted as more than 30 nascent soul cultivators and dozens of golden core cultivators walked out. It wasn't just Fairy Jing, Chang Yu, and Wu Tian. Even Su Tingzi, Xue Mingzi, Ao Zhantian, and the other nascent soul cultivators who were brought out by Xiao Hua were dumbfounded. After all, they were taken in by Xiao Hua one by one, so they couldn't see anything. Now that they all came out, they could see the results. These were dozens of nascent soul cultivators and hundreds of golden core cultivators. Which country or Taoist cultivator could control so many nascent soul and golden core cultivators? There were dozens of nascent soul cultivators, early, mid and late nascent soul cultivators, and some of them were familiar with each other. At this moment, those who knew each other greeted each other, and those who didn't know each other introduced themselves. It was a lively scene. Apart from Xiao Hua, who stood at the head of the table, Fairy Jing, Su Tingzi, and the others were also present. Fairy Jing, in particular, was tactful enough to sneak into the group of mid-nascent soul cultivators and exchange greetings with a few of them. After the time it took to eat half a meal, the noise in the hall gradually died down. Xiao Hua looked around and coughed twice, then raised his voice. Fellow Taoists, although everyone was talking, they were all paying attention to Xiao Hua. When they heard Xiao Hua speak, everyone immediately stopped. Ao Zhantian and the other late nascent soul cultivators stood at the front, while the other cultivators lined up according to their cultivation. They all bowed and said, "Thank you, Taoist Xiao, for saving our lives." As he looked at the nascent soul stage and golden core stage cultivators that filled the place, Xiao Hua's little tail was slightly raised. Right, when Xiao Hua was on the Dawn Rain continent, he had only seen a few nascent soul stage cultivators. Now, these nascent soul stage cultivators that were comparable in number to the Dawn Rain continent had to bow down to him and even serve him for 1,000 years. How could Xiao Hua not be complacent? However, Xiao Hua's complacency only lasted for a moment. He immediately raised his hand and said with a smile, "Everyone, there's no need to thank me. This is also a coincidence. Moreover, the heavenly Tao didn't want to cut off the descendants of my Tao sect, so it borrowed my hand. If you want to thank someone, you have to thank the Tao sect seniors in the heavens." Hee hee. Ao Zhantian smiled bitterly as he looked at Xiao Hua's harmless smile. He felt extremely bitter in his heart. He had seen Xiao Hua's angry smile before. The soaring dragon shears were even sharper than a sword, hanging above his head. Why didn't the senior from the Taoism appear at that time? Why did he have to swear a blood oath and serve Xiao Hua for 1,000 years to come up with an excuse? Similarly, Xiao Hua didn't care about what others thought and said, "This is also a sign of the prosperity of my Tao sect. You may not know that the Jade Pavilion meeting this time is a trap for Star-Lord Hall to massacre my Tao sect cultivators." At this point, Xiao Hua raised his eyes to look at Fairy Jing. Fairy Jing hid among the nascent soul cultivators and gave Xiao Hua a desperate look. It seemed that she didn't intend to speak. Xiao Hua smiled. He naturally understood what Fairy Jing was thinking. He had obtained the memories of Sun Horse of Star and Tail Fire Tiger. After coming out, he also listened to Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong's analysis. Naturally, he knew more than Fairy Jing. It was naturally more appropriate for him to explain than Fairy Jing. Then, Xiaohua explained the arrangements and plans of the Confucian cultivators on the Jade Mountain, as well as the losses of the Dao sect cultivators. All the cultivators present, whether they were early golden core or late nascent soul cultivators, had a great change in expression. The trace of dissatisfaction and unhappiness in their hearts from being forced to swear allegiance had now completely turned into rejoicing. If they hadn't met Xiaohua, they would have already fallen on the Jade Mountain. Since they could live, why should they care too much? After Xiaohua finished speaking, he looked at the changes in everyone's expressions and said with a smile, "Since the Dao sect seniors borrowed this Xiao to rescue you, then this Xiao would like to thank the Dao sect seniors for giving this Xiao an opportunity to work together with everyone to contribute to the Dao sect of the hidden immortal continent." At this point, Xiaohua didn't wait for everyone to speak and immediately changed the topic. He scratched his head and said with a smile, "Actually, I won't hide it from everyone. When it comes to contributing to the Dao sect of the hidden immortal continent, this Xiao also feels that it's a bit empty. Long before this Xiao came to the Jade Mountain, this Xiao only had one goal, which was to get the Imperial Preceptor's signature and establish my own country. I want to be a comfortable retired emperor and enjoy the happiness of one side. Even when I saw all of you, I only felt a kind of warmth and emotion. To be able to gather so many Taoist cultivators together in the hidden immortal continent where there are so many Confucian cultivators is really a very happy thing. It's far more interesting than this Xiao hiding in the cave and quietly cultivating. Therefore, I have a wish. Even if we don't contribute to the Taoist sect, even if we don't fight against the Confucian cultivators, even if we drink wine and enjoy the flowers and talk about the sword when we are busy, I want to gather all of you together so that we can enjoy the joy of cultivation. The happiness of cultivation? All the cultivators were dumbfounded. This was the first time they'd heard of the phrase, the joy of cultivation. Perhaps they'd experienced this sort of joy when they just entered the aura refining realm. It was the pleasure of grasping a divine ability for the first time, a comfort that surpassed that of ordinary people. However, as their cultivation grew more difficult and as the years passed, this sort of joy had long since disappeared. Aside from foul winds and bloody rain, there was only infighting and scheming, and even mutual deception. One bottleneck needed to be broken through one after another, one opponent needed to be killed one after another, one conspiracy needed to be cracked one after another. This kind of endless life seemed to have become the main theme of cultivation, making them unable to see any hope. Sometimes, many people would ask themselves, why did they cultivate? Was it for the sake of divine ability? Magic power? Lifespan? They had divine ability, they also had magic power, and their lifespan was even more extraordinary. However, when thousands of years of cultivation were dominated by boredom, slaughter, and fear, who would still think about the benefits of lifespan? Where was the happiness? Of course, everyone was different. There were also many ambitious cultivators who found their own position in this long cultivation life and found the so-called happiness of cultivation. Seeing everyone in a daze, Xiaohua faintly smiled and said, "Confucian cultivators often say that there is beauty in books, and there is a house of gold in books. This Xiao doesn't know whether there is beauty in books or not, but this Xiao knows that this is the happiness of Confucian cultivators. Since the cultivation of Confucian cultivators is so happy, why can't the cultivation of Taoism be happy? Of course, this Xiao also doesn't know what this happiness is. I will have to ask everyone to search for it together with this Xiao." Once again, this Xiao thanks everyone. When everyone heard this, they understood that Xiaohua was helping them cover up the awkwardness of being forced to work for them. They were at a loss because they didn't know whether Xiaohua's words were true or false. They didn't know what this happiness of cultivation was. Could Taoist Zhao's words have broken the sky in the well? This old man's Tao heart has been shaken. This so-called happiness of cultivation, this old man has never thought about it before. After cultivating for thousands of years, this old man should calm down and think about it carefully. Taoist Xiao, This old man wants to go to the Black Wind Mountain Range to study the Tao with Taoist Xiao. I don't know if Taoist Xiao will allow it. Shui Mingzi understood Xiao Hua's thoughts. Xiao Hua laughed and cupped his hands. Taoist Shui Mingzi can go, how can this Xiao not be happy? We will only study the Tao and discuss the Tao, not fight to the death. We will only see the Tao of heaven and not talk about the difference between Confucian and Taoist. Good. This old man also wants to go. Ao Zhantian hurriedly clapped his hands. Seeing that Xiao Hua had given them such a big step and such a great ambition, how could the cultivators who had made the blood oath not know how to take advantage of the situation? In the end, even the cultivators who hadn't sworn blood oaths were overjoyed. It was rare for them to be so enthusiastic about the same thing. Good, Xiao Hua waved his hand and a large pile of jade eyes flew out. This is the location of the Black Wind Mountain Range and a message from this Xiao. Take it and go. Fellow Taoists, you are all people with great achievements in cultivation. You are all trustworthy. I look forward to drinking and chatting with you fellow Taoists a year later. This old man will definitely go. I hope Taoist Zhao's immortal wine can satisfy this old man. Ao Zhantian took the jade eyes with a smile. He looked around and said, Taoist Xiao, please open the formation. This old man doesn't have the ability to break Taoist Zhao's formation. Hee, fellow Taoist Ao, please. Xiao Hua smiled and opened a corner of the capital Heaven Star formation. Ao Zhantian didn't stand on ceremony and cupped his hands. This old man will take his leave first. We will meet again at the Black Wind Mountain Range. Please. Xiao Hua returned the gesture and sent Ao Zhantian away. Seeing Ao Zhantian leave so easily, Shui Mingzi and the others were relieved. They said their goodbyes and left. Soon, only Fairy Jing, Su Tingzi, and Xiong Yi were left in the formation. There were also about 20 golden core cultivators. Su Tingzi didn't say anything. He frowned as if he was thinking about something. Xiong Yi also had a puzzled look on his face. He seemed to want to ask Xiao Hua something, so he didn't leave. Neither of them had sworn blood oaths to Xiao Hua, so Xiao Hua couldn't force them. He turned to look at the 20 golden core cultivators. Apart from Chang Yu and Wu Tian, the 20 golden core cultivators all knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Master, this disciple sincerely wants to become your disciple. Please accept us. Hiss. Fairy Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. Su Tingzi's expression changed slightly. As for Xiong Yi, his eyes flashed with a hint of fanaticism. Hee, get up. Xiao Hua helped the golden core cultivators up and said with a smile, It's not impossible to become my disciple. However, this old man wants to see how your temperaments are. For now, you will all be in-name disciples. Chapter 3674. Thank you, Master. All the Jindan stage disciples were wild with joy. After all, they knew better than anyone the difference between being an apprentice and being loyal to a master. Cultivators who had died once could see more clearly than others, and many taboos were nothing more than smoke in their eyes. I don't have the ability to guide you one by one for now. All of you stay with Chang Yu at the side. Once we return to Black Wind Ridge, I'll let all of you know that joining my sect is the best choice you'll ever make in your lives. Oh, it's the best choice besides joining my Tao sect. Yes, disciple understands. Xiao Hua's words were somewhat unsteady, but it made many golden core disciples feel warm in their hearts. After agreeing in unison, they stood aside. Xiong, Xiao Hua asked with a smile, I promised you that I would take you out of the Jade Pavilion gathering. At that time, although you said you wanted to serve me, I knew you were in a dangerous situation and had no choice but to say those words. Now, I will give you a chance. You can leave now. Taoist Master Xiao, I want to ask you a question first, then I can decide. Xiong Yi said very seriously. Taoist Master, the joy of cultivation is admiring the flowers and the moon and discussing the Tao? If so, why did Taoist Master come to the Jade Pavilion gathering to snatch the Imperial Preceptor's lot? Xiong Yi immediately asked. Let's not talk about cultivation first. Xiao Hua smiled faintly and explained, Just talking about happiness, there are many kinds of happiness in the secular world. Drinking wine can make you happy, singing can make you happy, dancing can make you happy, having a lot of friends can make you happy, having power over the world can make you happy, having millions of soldiers can make you happy, and even adjusting your breath in your spare time can make you happy. There is only one kind of happiness, but there are endless ways to be happy. Everyone's happiness may be different. I hope to pursue the happiness of cultivation, but I said before that I don't know what happiness is. That's why I want to discuss the Tao with you all. Some fellow Taoists like alchemy, maybe refining 9th grade pills can make them happy. Some fellow Taoists like refining tools, maybe refining spiritual treasures can make them happy. Of course, there may also be fellow Taoists who like power, like building a country, like fighting against Confucian cultivators. When the purpose of building a country surpasses the needs of cultivation, this kind of fighting will naturally make fellow Taoists happy. Besides, to experience the joy of cultivation, there's a price. There's no such thing as happiness or pain for no reason in this world, especially on the hidden immortal continent. If our Taoist cultivators want to be happy, they might have to build on the foundation of the pain of Confucian cultivators. After speaking up to here, Xiaohua let out a long sigh and looked up into the sky. I don't dare to say that I have lofty aspirations, but I also hope that the fellow Taoists I get to know can all find their own happiness. Xiongyi smiled and said, I know a little about what you're talking about, but I'm willing to fight with those Confucian cultivators. I feel that it's more interesting than pure cultivation. Xiaohua looks at this cultivator who didn't listen to Taoist Huada's orders at the Jade Pavilion Assembly and nods. Since I've taken the State Master's lot, I'm really going to establish a country. There won't be too few disputes with Confucian cultivators. If fellow Taoist Xiong is willing, I'd like to ask fellow Taoist to lend me a hand. Alright, I'm also someone who died once. Seeing Taoist Xiao being so magnanimous and straightforward, I'm also willing to follow you and see how far our Taoist cultivators can go on the hidden immortal continent. Xiong Yi resolutely kneels on the ground and says, Disciple kowtows in salute to Master. Ah? Not to mention Xiaohua himself, even Fairy Jing and the others who were watching from the side also woke up. Why did he want to take Xiong Yi as his master? Xiaohua's astonishment disappeared in a flash. With a smile on his face, he said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Xiong, what do you mean? Isn't it good for you and me to be fellow Taoists? If you work for me, I won't shortchange your cultivation needs. Why do you have to take me as your master? Xiong Yi raised his head and said very seriously, Disciple naturally doesn't need to explain the difference between working for me and taking me as your master. If they could be the same, these dozen or so Jindan disciples wouldn't take senior as their master and would choose to work for you instead. Especially disciple, I feel that I've already reached the end of this path of cultivation. I'm already powerless to struggle and unable to find the goal to move forward. Disciple needs a cultivator like senior to guide the way for disciple and illuminate the way forward. Moreover, disciple wants to do, besides cultivate, disciple wants to strengthen our Taoism. No Confucian cultivator can casually bully our Taoism disciples, and the so-called Jade Pavilion meeting can no longer be held. Disciple wants to realize this wish, but without a Taoism expert like senior to protect disciple, disciple can't do it. Moreover, although senior's cultivation is at the upper 4th level, you've already suppressed Taoist Huada, Shui Mingzi, and Ao Zhantian, 3 late nascent soul stage seniors. Stepping into the 5th level is just around the corner. At that time, the number of cultivators who want senior's guidance will be more than the number of carps crossing the river. At that time, senior won't be able to guide them, so disciple might as well become senior's disciple right now and listen to senior's teachings. Can't guide them? After bowing and saluting, he led the 20 or so golden core disciples into the sky. With a wave of his hand, a small flying boat actually landed in front of them. Dozens of people boarded the flying boat, cupped their hands towards Xiaohua again, and flew away quickly. Taoist Xiao. Seeing that there were only 3 people left in the great formation, Su Tingzi thought for a moment and said, This one knows that Taoist Xiao has the intention to guide me, But this one, fellow Taoist, are you afraid? Xiaohua asked, hitting the nail on the head. Su Tingzi was stunned and immediately nodded. That's right. If Taoist Xiao didn't save so many nascent soul cultivators and didn't accept so many golden core disciples, as disciples, to be honest, this one really wants to pledge loyalty to Taoist Xiao and cultivate together with Taoist Xiao, just like in the Jade Pavilion Conference. However, Taoist Xiao's movements are really too big. Although Star-Lord Hall's Kong Hongwu might not notice Taoist Xiao right now, he will pay attention to all the Taoist cultivators who came out of the Jade Pavilion Conference. When he sees Taoist Xiao's movements, he will definitely take action. Taoist Xiao. It's not that this one doesn't have confidence in Taoist Xiao, but this one is really clear about the methods of Confucian cultivators. A small Star-Lord Hall, which only controls the Jade Mountain that is several tens of thousands of li wide, was able to kill several hundred nascent soul cultivators and several thousand golden core cultivators of my Taoist sect. It can be said that they almost wiped out all the Taoist cultivators of the hidden immortal continent. If they really send out, not to mention immortal soldiers and generals, even if several aristocratic families join forces and send out fierce generals, Taoist Xiao, do you think you can resist them? Hee, fellow Taoist, you're too extreme. Xiaohua said with a smile. I invited these fellow Taoists here just to share the joy of cultivation with them. I didn't say that I wanted to oppose Confucian cultivators. Then what about fellow Taoist Xiongyi? Su Tingzi stared at Xiaohua and asked. This concubine really doesn't understand what fellow Taoist means. Oh! Hearing this, Xiaohua said in all seriousness, Fairy Jing, although you and I have just met, you were able to save this Xiao. Moreover, in order to cover up my injuries, you walked hand in hand with this Xiao in front of all the cultivators. This Xiao will never forget your actions. Therefore, this Xiao won't hide anything from Fairy Jing. Speaking up to this point, Xiaohua was somewhat tongue-tied. After all, he had already told her that if he hid anything from her, she shouldn't blame him. Seeing Xiaohua's embarrassment, Fairy Jing pursed her lips and smiled, saying, Actually, it's nothing. This concubine already knows that fellow Taoist is using this concubine as a cover to lure others into a trap. This concubine just feels a little uncomfortable. If you had told this concubine earlier, this concubine wouldn't have thought too much about it. Could it be that this concubine would leak it out? So Fairy Jing already understands. Xiaohua said with a smile, this Xiao still thinks that his actions are flawless. Naturally in the eyes of others, but fellow Taoist didn't hide anything from this concubine. There are many things that even Senior Daoran doesn't know about, so this concubine naturally understands. Fairy Jing said with a smile, fellow Taoist, there must be nascent soul cultivators lying in ambush inside your nation treasure. After you and I act as bait to lure those cultivators with ill intentions, fellow Taoist will send them out, right? This. Xiaohua scratched his head and said with a bitter smile, I won't hide it from Fairy Jing. This Xiao's mountain river seal can only contain those cultivators. There are no others. That's impossible. Fairy Jing was a little surprised. She looked around and muttered, there aren't any cultivators following us within a few hundred kilometers. Could it be that this concubine misunderstood fellow Taoist? Xiaohua touched his nose with his hand and thought for a moment, saying, Fairy Jing is right. This Xiao wants to lure people into a trap. Because this person covets this Xiao is very surprised. Because this person has no enmity with this Xiao, and Xiaohua even helped him. However, this Xiao didn't expect that he would want to harm this Xiao. This Xiao wants to know why. In particular, he has seen this Xiao's cultivation and strength. This Xiao really wants to see what his trump card is. Sigh, fellow Taoist is a bit careless. Fairy Jing said worriedly, fellow Taoist's injuries won't heal for several years. This concubine's strength is limited. Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. It doesn't matter. This is only a guess of this Xiao's, and it might not be true. Moreover, this Xiao feels that that guy isn't so stupid as to really chase after this Xiao. That's good. Fairy Jing smiled sweetly. Now that fellow Taoist said this concubine's heart is still a bit anxious and on edge. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said while looking at the sky, this Xiao originally didn't want to say it, but who asked someone to think so much? Hee hee. Fairy Jing laughed as if she hadn't relaxed for a long time. The two of them were silent for a moment, and Fairy Jing asked again, this concubine feels that the happiness of cultivation that fellow Taoists talked about to those nascent soul cultivators is very interesting. It seems to have enlightened this concubine, as if this concubine's previous cultivation had deviated. Xiao Hua smiled and said, what if this Xiao says that this is nothing but a lie, a drawing of a pie or a fantasy? Would Fairy Jing be very disappointed? I would. Fairy Jing's face turned bitter. Actually, this concubine also thought about it before. The Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent are really free and unfettered, and the Buddhist sects of the Western Paradise also cultivate Western Paradise. Even the demons of the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm should be incomparably free. Why is it that our Tao sects are bullied and controlled like this? Is there no paradise that belongs to our Tao sects? There is. But it's not here, nor is it at this time. Xiao Huan nodded with certainty. Fairy Jing's eyes flashed with surprise. Then fellow Taoist Xiao, tell me, where is it? When is it? There will be such a day. There will also be such a place. Xiao Hua made a solemn vow and said, this Xiao will let you see that the cultivators of my Tao sect can freely fly in the sky. My Tao sect's sects will bloom on the earth. My Tao sect's seniors will soar into the sky from time to time. There will be a smooth path of cultivation in front of us. Perhaps at that time, this Xiao will talk about the happiness of cultivation with Fairy Jing. Establishing a sect. Fairy Jing's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. Previously, when I saw fellow Taoist Xiong Yi, and those 20 Jindan disciples call fellow Taoist Xiao Master, this concubine is very fond of you. It feels like a home. Fairy Jing, with your nascent soul middle stage cultivation, you can naturally accept disciples, right? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Fairy Jing wryly smiled and shook her head. This concubine isn't as ambitious as fellow Taoist. I don't dare to attract the attention of Confucian cultivators. At this point, Fairy Jing suddenly thought of something and asked, by the way, fellow Taoist Xiao, when Shui Mingzi and Ao Zhantian were here, why didn't you tell them about the alliance between Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong? If you told them, wouldn't they be more confident? It's different. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and said, these cultivators are fundamentally different from the 200 people that Zhang Daoran and Master Sun Kong brought. Fellow Taoist, please enlighten me. Chapter 3676. Oh, who's this? Xiao Hua's face was a bit astonished. He looked at Fairy Jing blankly and asked in astonishment, I'm injured, and my spiritual sense is also somewhat damaged. It's hard to tell who it is. Fairy Jing was startled, but she soon understood. She blinked her eyes and said, this cultivator's cultivation should be at the middle nascent soul stage, but I'm not familiar with his spiritual sense. It's not a fellow Taoist I'm familiar with. It shouldn't be Taoist Huod either. Oh, Xiao Hua nodded and stood up. He looked into the distance and said with a smile, is that the fellow Taoist who came to see me off? Perhaps. Fairy Jing didn't dare to stop the flying boat. She continued to fly into the distance, but she was secretly on guard. After all, they had been flying for so long, and they had yet to see any nascent soul cultivators. Perhaps Xiao Hua was right about this sudden appearance. Fairy Jing. A moment later, a voice that Fairy Jing wasn't familiar with came from the distance. Please wait a moment. Fairy Jing slightly tilted her head and thought for a moment. Her expression slightly changed, but soon returned to normal. She said to Xiao Hua, fellow Taoist Xiao, it's Taoist Yuan Qing. Fairy Jing's eyes flickered with a misty expression. She looked very beautiful. That's right. Xiao Hua said with a smile, since it's an old friend, let's wait a moment. All right. Fairy Jing looked at Xiao Hua's appearance and could only helplessly nod. She tapped her foot and the flying boat stopped in midair. After a while, Taoist Yuan Qing flew over. His face was slightly flushed and his forehead was unexpectedly sweating. Taoist Xiao. Taoist Yuan Qing called from afar. Why are you flying in this direction? I thought you were going back to Black Wind Mountain. You flew towards Yu province for a long time. Hehe, so it's fellow Taoist Yuan Qing. Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands. I had some matters to attend to. Liang province, so I didn't directly return to Black Wind Mountain. Hehe. Taoist Yuan Qing descended from the sky and glanced at Fairy Jing. I'm afraid you're not really going to Liang province? Are we still going to the seaside? Ha. Xiaohua laughed heartily and waved his hand. You're too kind. This one ran into Fairy Jing at the Jade Pavilion banquet. Moreover, Fairy Jing was slightly injured at that time, so this Xiao conveniently brought her out. After asking, I found out that Fairy Jing was heading in the same direction as this Xiao, so this Xiao abruptly asked Fairy Jing to lead the way. That's all. That's all. Taoist Yuan Qing suddenly understood. He looked at Fairy Jing and said with a smile, Fairy Jing, you're really lucky to meet Taoist Xiao again and again. At this point, how could Fairy Jing not know that Xiaohua was guarding against Taoist Yuan Qing? She also smiled and said, yes, compared to Zhenren Jingting, my luck is not just a little bit better. Indeed. At the mention of Taoist Master Jingting, Taoist Master Yuan Qing seemed to have found a topic to talk about. He hurriedly continued and sighed, apart from the difficulty of cultivation, our Taoist cultivators are also far inferior to Confucian cultivators in terms of luck. Taoist Master Jingt. I'm afraid he's a very extreme example. Although he wanted to serve Taoist Xiao in the end, he still died. At this time, Taoist Master Jingting's nascent soul was naturally already in Xiaohua's mountain river seal. With the mother-child spirit fruit, he should be able to cultivate a scattered nascent soul like Hong Songzi. Although he couldn't compare to Xiaohua and the others, he was still alive after all, which was a lot better than dying. What Xiaohua was currently thinking about was how to use the immortal slaying platform or the 5 Qis righteous thunder to refine the 2 nascent souls, and even the 100 or so nascent souls that were about to be repaired. Of course, he wouldn't mention this to Taoist Yuan Qing and the others. Therefore, Xiaohua asked with a smile, that's right, Taoist Yuan Qing chased me all the way here. Is there something you need from this Xiao? Taoist Yuan Qing waved his hand and said, how could there be anything? It's just that this one received a lot of help from Taoist at the Yaotai conference. Moreover, this one already said before entering the Yaotai mountain that this one wanted to ask Taoist for advice on cultivation. Who would have thought that there was no time before the Yaotai conference? And this time, the Yaotai conference was a mess. As soon as this one left the Yaotai mountain, Taoist disappeared. Hastily, Hai Hongzi and I split up to look for Taoist. Later on, Hai Hongzi encountered a lot of calamities in the Yaotai mountain's Great Formation. In his heart, he regretted not following Taoist. He even wanted to apologize to Taoist. It's fine, it's fine. Xiaohua said with a smile. It's all in the past. Don't mention it. In the face of benefits and danger, no matter if it's a cultivator or a mortal, they all have a selfish side. This one can't avoid this custom, and there's no harm in imposing it on others. Alas, unfortunately, fellow Taoist Hong Songzi's luck was not good. In the end, he still fell in the Great Formation. Taoist Yuan Qing sighed and said, fortunately, his nascent soul was protected by the Star Lord Palace's Great Formation. I don't know what kind of opportunity he had. Opportunity? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and asked very strangely. Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing said, those fellow Taoists whose bodies were destroyed, their nascent souls weren't destroyed by the Great Formation? Could it be that they had other opportunities? Taoist Yuan Qing smiled bitterly and shook his head. I don't know about this. However, since those nascent souls weren't killed by the Great Formation at that time, they probably wouldn't be killed later on. I only guessed that they might be protected by the Star Lord Palace. Alas, even if they can protect them, what can they do without their bodies? Xiaohua glanced at Fairy Jing, but her expression didn't change. It seemed that she wasn't looking for Ren Jing for her nascent soul. Let's not talk about it, let's not talk about it. Taoist Yuan Qing waved his hand and said, I'll send a messaging talisman to Hai Hongzi. Fairy Jing, let's keep going. I'll take the opportunity to ask you some questions about cultivation. Fairy Jing looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua smiled and said, let's listen to fellow Taoist Yuan Qing. If Hai Hongzi doesn't come, we'll take fellow Taoist Yuan Qing to the seaside. Very good, very good. Taoist Yuan Qing sent the messaging talisman and asked Xiao Hua to sit down. He also sat down. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly thought of something and said curiously, Oh, Fairy Jing, aren't you injured? How can I trouble you to drive the boat? Why don't you be my spiritual shuttle? Oh, since Taoist Xiao and Taoist Yuan Qing are here, I'll naturally drive the boat. Fairy Jing covered it up casually. Both of you have profound cultivation and are discussing the Tao. I can learn a thing or two from you. All right. Taoist Yuan Qing smiled and ignored Fairy Jing. He opened his mouth to ask Xiao Hua for advice. Xiao Hua didn't stand on ceremony. As long as Taoist Yuan Qing asked a question, he would answer it from the simple to the profound. He didn't hide anything and even drew inferences about other problems. Whether it was the essence of Confucian cultivation or Buddhist scriptures, he could always explain it well. Not only did Taoist Yuan Qing scratch his ears and cheeks, but even Fairy Jing's face blushed as if she couldn't control her joy. For more than 3 days, Xiao Hua didn't stop talking. He talked about the essence of cultivation in the middle nascent soul stage. It was like a deluge of heavenly flowers. Occasionally, Fairy Jing would come to realize that Xiao Hua wasn't talking to Taoist Yuan Qing at all. He was clearly talking to her. Joy and disappointment appeared in her watery eyes, but she immediately focused and didn't dare to delay. In her 1,000 years of cultivation, she had never been as happy as listening to lectures for 3 days. Taoist Yuan Qing's eyes flashed across the abyss as he pondered. Suddenly, a hint of panic flashed through his eyes. In this panic, there seemed to be reluctance, choice, and hesitation. But soon, Taoist Yuan Qing's eyes became clear again. He stood up with a smile and bowed. Taoist Xiao, this junior really admires Taoist Yuan Qing's cultivation. The teachings I've received in these 3 days are worth 300 years of cultivation. This junior really didn't expect Taoist Yuan Qing to be so well-versed in Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Moreover, you've cleverly combined the teachings of these 3 sections. Although this junior doesn't know what level Taoist Yuan Qing's cultivation has reached, the teachings you've given me in these 3 days have answered all of my questions. This junior is very regretful. If this junior had met senior 100 years earlier, no, 10 years earlier, this junior wouldn't have had such a difficult time. Of course, even so, this junior is confident that I can reach the late nascent soul stage after receiving senior's teachings. This junior must thank Taoist Xiao. Oh? Why are you being so polite? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and said in astonishment, Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, please take a seat. This place is still far from where we're going. Let me have a good chat with fellow Taoist Yuan Qing. This junior really wants to ask for some advice from Taoist Xiao. Unfortunately, as Taoist Yuan Qing spoke, his figure turned into a streak of light and immediately fled from the flying boat. His voice, however, remained. Taoist Xiao, your path has come to an end. Oh! Xiao Hua didn't find it strange at all. He said regretfully, Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, you've finally revealed your true face? This Xiao is still looking forward to your repentance. Huh? Taoist Yuan Qing saw that not only was Xiao Hua not nervous, he even spoke in such a manner as if he had seen through everything. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. He hurriedly said, How did you know? As he spoke, boom, boom, boom. 3 enormous rumbling sounds rushed out from the clouds of the heavenly moat. After one of the rumbling sounds, a sharp eagle cry suddenly rang out. A pair of wings that were over 30 meters in size stirred up a strong wind. A tall, red-faced cultivator rushed out from the abyss while standing on Heaven Shaking Tsong. Heaven Shaking Tsong's eyes were like lightning, his eagle claws were like hooks, and his entire body's navy blue feathers were dotted with red spots. For heaven-shaking song rushed out in front of Xiao Hua's head. Another bestial roar that sounded like a great bell came from behind Xiao Hua. A short cultivator wearing tight clothes rode a scarlet leopard that was several meters in size out of the fog. Not only was the leopard's entire body scarlet red, even its eyes were abnormally red. Fire lotuses faintly flickered on its 4 hooves as it stepped on the air. If you didn't make that choice back then, you wouldn't have died today. Ah! Fairy Jing raised her eyebrows and said in surprise, "What? You were there that day?" "Yes, he was half a step earlier than you," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Unfortunately, he was frightened by my plan to beat you at your own game. He thought it was my plan this time, so he didn't dare to make a move. When he wanted to make a move, you came. But when he wanted to make a move on you, the formation was broken. So he had no choice but to endure until now." You? How do you know everything?" Taoist Yuan Qing looked as if he had seen a ghost, his face pale. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. "There are still many things I don't know. I don't know why you want to kill me. I also don't know why I've told you so much in these 3 days. You clearly know that my cultivation is far above yours, but you still want to kill me. Fellow Taoists." Taoist Yuan Qing didn't answer Xiao Hua. Instead, he turned to Hai Hongzi and the other 2 and said, "Now that things have come to this, there's no need to retreat. Xiao Hua killed Star Monarch Jing Mushuan of Star Monarch Palace. He won't let this news leak out. Regardless of whether he still has magic power or not, he won't let us live. Moreover, fellow Taoists, don't worry. I did see Xiao Hua faint earlier. He was brought out of Jade Mountain by Li Jing. He doesn't have the magic power to fly. Moreover, in these 3 days, I didn't see him use any true essence. His nascent soul is long gone." When Hai Hongzi and the others heard this, their expressions became calm. At this time, Taoist Yuan Qing said to Xiao Hua, "Xiao Hua, as for why I want to kill you, you can rest assured. I'm not an idiot. I definitely won't tell you. However, I can tell you that even if you preach in front of this old man for 3 days, this old man will still kill you. Because as long as we kill you, the 4 of us will no longer be restricted by Confucian cultivators." It was far from what Fairy Jing had said earlier. Xiao Hua looked at Fairy Jing with some doubt. At this moment, Fairy Jing had already walked in front of Xiao Hua and blocked him with her figure that couldn't be considered weak. "Sure enough, you 2 are in love. Taoist Master Xiao, you have such good luck with women." Another cultivator standing on a rainbow leopard opened his mouth and laughed loudly. His eyes flashed with a dirty look. Participating in the Jade Pavilion gathering and being able to obtain the heart of a nascent soul female cultivator is more precious than any treasure. But rest assured, Taoist Master Xiao, your luck with women, this old man will enjoy it for you in the future. Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to that cultivator's gaze. He looked at Taoist Master Yuan Qing and nodded. "For this ambush, you've really put in a lot of effort. Not only did you find Song Zhentian, who naturally restrains seeking spirit mice, you even found a demonic beast that Yinghua is afraid of. AI, to be honest, to be able to arrange all this in such a short time, you're definitely a genius. Killing you is truly a pity." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.